Chapter 571. Formations were undoubtedly indispensable for a cultivation sect. A powerful mountain protection formation, a conversion formation to gather spirit chi, and a survey formation to monitor the movements of the wind and grass. A sect would have at least 3 great defensive formations guarding it. For some Taoist orthodoxies that have been passed down since ancient times, after the continuous operation of generations of disciples, it was very likely that they would have over 1,000 defensive formations working together to form a gigantic defensive formation. Snow God Palace had a history of hundreds of years. Although the mountain protection formation of Snow God Palace was not as powerful as thousands, there were still dozens that worked together. Just after Li Changsheng sent Bo Gu flying with a punch, the scene at the mountain gate had been shown to the palace master of Snow God Palace through the survey formation. Along with the palace master of Snow God Palace, the higher-ups of Snow God Palace witnessed it with their own eyes. The crowd, who had been excited about Great Elder Bo Gu's appearance, fell silent when they saw Great Elder Bo Gu being sent flying with a single punch from that young man. What kind of strength was it to send a late-stage Vajra realm expert to the brink of death with one punch? Although many of the higher-ups of Snow God Palace did not say anything, they knew in their hearts that Snow God Palace had really gotten into trouble this time. To have such combat strength at such a young age, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was an absolute genius. Absolute geniuses often had extremely terrifying masters behind them. What should we do? Everyone looked at the palace master of Snow God Palace who was sitting on the high seat. This woman who was cold to the bone from inside out. The cold expression on her face had never changed since she became the palace master of Snow God Palace. But at this moment, she could not help but frown slightly. She knew the strength of the Grand Elder best. Even if she were to attack, she only had a 60% chance of winning. But under the young man's fist, she was like a sandbag that did not know how to dodge at all. Moreover, the young man's speed was too fast. Even the palace master of Snow God Palace, who thought that she was not slow in her attacks, felt that the chances of her blocking the young man's fist were really slim. This is a strong opponent. It will be extremely difficult for us to block him with just the strength of Snow God Palace. Even if we use the entire spirit vein formation of Snow God Palace, even if we can block him, we will definitely suffer heavy losses. As soon as the Snow God Palace princess's words fell, everyone's heart sank. As a super sect that stood tall in the northern region, they usually felt that the words disciples of the Snow God Palace made them walk with the wind. They had never thought that they would be forced to such an extent one day. Then what should we do? One of the elders stepped forward. As the second elder of the Snow God's Palace, Lu Hashan was undoubtedly the one who had the most right to speak other than the palace master. The only thing we could do now is to find reinforcements. Rumor has it that the tower master of the mountain gazing tower has stepped into the finger profound realm not long ago, and has become the undisputed number 1 person in the northern lands. He has proposed marriage to me many times, but I have rejected him. Now that the sect is on the brink of destruction, even if I don't like him as a person, I should know how to choose. As soon as the palace lord of Snow God Palace finished speaking, everyone's eyes were filled with sorrow. Palace master, since this person is here for the outer sect disciple named Luo Dan, why don't you let Luo Dan go? Asking for peace with him is better than sacrificing yourself. The second elder said. Everyone knew that the mountain-gazing tower master was an old lecher with countless wives and lovers. Although he had already said that if the palace lord of Snow God Palace was willing to marry him, he would marry her officially and make her the first lady. It was just that the palace lord of Snow God Palace was not only marrying an old man, but also sharing a husband with another woman. How could she bear it? Second elder, you may not know, but Luo Dan should have been promoted to an inner sect disciple because of her contribution in finding a dragon pearl for me. But she was chosen by an outer sect disciple and wanted to be his concubine. I had already agreed, but Luo Dan did not agree. In a fit of anger, I severely injured her and broke her meridians. At this moment, she hates me to the core. If I let her go and let her meet with that young man, I'm afraid that not only will the young man not stop, but he will also kill all of us in the Snow God's Palace. The palace lord of Snow God Palace finished and sighed. Second Elder, I will now hand over the command flag that controls the 61 formations of the Snow God Palace to you. I will go and get reinforcements and will be back in half an hour at the latest. So as long as you can hold them off for half an hour, it will be equivalent to protecting the foundation of the Snow God's Palace for hundreds of years. With that, she took out a command flag and flew it directly to the Second Elder. The Second Elder caught the command flag in his hand and said, "Don't worry, Palace Lord. I can't kill that young man, but if I can't hold him off for half an hour with the mountain guarding array of the Snow God's Palace, then all my years of cultivation will be in vain." Good. The frosty face of the palace master of the Snow God's Palace also changed slightly. Who would have thought that just punishing an ordinary outer sect disciple would bring disaster to the Snow God's Palace? But it had already happened, and she would not allow the foundation of the Snow God's Palace for hundreds of years to be destroyed by her own hands. As for the outer sect disciple, especially the young man who had forced the Snow God's Palace into a corner, when she invited the mountain watching tower master, she would personally stab him to the heart to vent her hatred. The mountain watching tower master is a profound finger realm elite. I don't believe that he can't deal with this young man. The palace lord of Snow God's Palace thought with hatred. After saluting the Second Elder and saying, "Please," she went to the back mountain of the Snow God's Palace and took off in a helicopter. Only those who had reached the legendary Earth Immortal Realm could fly. Of course, the profound finger realm could also resist the gravity of the Earth to a large extent, but at most, it was called flying. When Li Changsheng was in the Khanate realm, he could fly with Yi Shuang in the air with the help of the Heart Wishful Sword. The Snow God Palace also had a high-level Dharma artifact, which could be used to fly with True Essence, but the consumption of True Essence had reached a terrifying level. If the palace lord of Snow God's Palace drove the Dharma artifact to ask for help, her True Essence would be exhausted before she could reach her destination. She would fall from the sky, and even if she did not die, she would be severely injured. The palace lord of Snow God's Palace left in the helicopter, and the Second Elder led some disciples of the Snow God's Palace to activate the array. Even the elders who were in seclusion, as well as a Supreme Elder, were forcibly called out of seclusion. In the end, a total of 6 Vajra Realm elites and 12 Khanate Realm elites gathered together to form an array. From the mountainside to the sky above the top of the mountain, a dazzling light shield rose in an instant. Li Changsheng and LV Bai, who were walking up the mountain step by step, were suddenly blocked in an instant. The Second Elder held the command flag that controlled the array, looked at the many disciples behind him and the elites of the Snow God's Palace standing on both sides of him, and felt a sense of pride. He thought to himself, this kind of defense can be said to be impregnable. Although that unknown youth was able to send First Elder Bo Gu flying with a single punch, it should be impossible for him to break through this kind of formation. Chapter 572. Mount Xianhuang was located north of the Great Snow Mountain, and it was a veritable paradise of the north. Originally, there used to be a few old itinerant cultivators living here. They were people of virtue and prestige in the northern lands. However, 10 years ago, an extremely vicious devil cultivator appeared out of nowhere and forcibly built a tower on the peak of Mount Xianhuang, where the spiritual energy was the densest. He called himself the master of Mountain View Tower. A few rogue cultivators were very angry and went to reason with him. In the end, 5 of the 7 Xiantian realm experts were killed by him, and the remaining 2 escaped with heavy injuries. Since that battle, Mount Xianhuang had become the personal territory of the Mountain Gazing Tower Lord. He recruited disciples on the mountain and established a sect. During this time, the friends and family of the 2 rogue cultivators who escaped and the 5 who were killed came several times to seek revenge from the Mountain Gazing Tower Lord. Unfortunately, the Mountain Gazing Tower Lord was too strong. Those who came to seek revenge ended up either dead or injured. The grudge between the 2 sides grew deeper and deeper, spreading for nearly 10 years. It wasn't until the mountain-gazing tower lord came out of seclusion and broke through to the finger-profound realm, becoming the #1 cultivator in the north, that the two rogue cultivators completely gave up on the idea of revenge. Now, palaces were built on Mount Xianhuang, and a wide and straight mountain path led to the peak. The mountain-gazing tower lord took in a dozen disciples, and the guardian elders also appointed a large number of disciples. At this time, the mountain-gazing tower lord stood on the magnificent mountain-gazing tower that had been renovated several times and looked down at the sea of clouds below. A silver helicopter landed at the foot of the mountain, and a disciple quickly came up to report. Snow God Palace Lord Yu, she requests an audience. Snow God Palace Lord Yu, she was someone the mountain-gazing tower lord had taken a liking to, but the Snow God Palace Lord thought he was too old and too fickle in love, so she never agreed. Snow God Palace was a sect that had been passed down for hundreds of years and had great prestige in the north, so he didn't dare to use force. But the more he couldn't get her, the more unbearable his itch was. The mountain-gazing tower master had just broken through to the finger-profound realm. He was just thinking about whether or not he should propose marriage again. What if that beautiful lady with extremely high standards suddenly agreed on the account that he was already the #1 person in the cultivation world of the northern lands? Just as he was imagining it, his eyes lit up when he heard his subordinates report. Quickly invite her in. The mountain viewing tower master straightened his lapel. In order to pursue the palace master of the Snow God Palace, he deliberately made himself look much younger. Greetings, mountain-gazing tower master. The two met at the entrance of the hall. Although the Snow God Temple Palace master Yu, she had a cold face. Her eyes were clearly anxious. Little sister Yu Shi, this is the first time you visited my mountain-gazing tower after so many years. I'll immediately have my subordinates prepare a banquet. We must properly entertain little sister. You're too kind, mountain-gazing tower master. I'm here to ask for a favor. What's there to beg? If there's anything, just say the word and I'll do it for you. Although the mountain-gazing house lord said so, Yushi knew that although he liked her, he was a person who wouldn't act unless he saw a rabbit. If there were no benefits, it would be impossible to get him to help for free. Knowing that the Snow God Palace was facing a disaster, the mountain-gazing tower master would definitely raise the price. But the Snow God Palace's affairs couldn't be delayed, so Yushi didn't want to talk nonsense and directly said, Mountain-gazing tower master, didn't you propose marriage to me several times? I promise you, as long as you help the Snow God Palace through this crisis. Even with the shrewdness of the mountain-gazing tower master, there was a bit of astonishment on his face, as if the sun had risen from the west. Why would the palace master of the Snow God Palace, who had always hated him, suddenly change her mind? I wonder what kind of crisis the Snow God Palace is facing. The mountain-gazing tower master's expression also became a bit dignified. For Yushi to make an exception and agree to marry him, the Snow God Palace must have encountered an unprecedented enemy. But as far as he knew, the Snow God Palace's strength was not weak. How could an ordinary person be able to force the Snow God Palace to this point? It's a young man, in his 20s, named Li Changsheng. The great elder of the Snow God Palace was knocked out by him with one punch. He is very likely to be a master at the peak of the Vajra realm. Hearing Yushi's words, the mountain-gazing tower master let out a sigh of relief. The peak of the Vajra realm. If it was a year ago, he might have been afraid, but now he was firmly in the early stage of the finger-profound realm. Although it was only the early stage, the difference between the finger-profound realm and the Vajra realm was like the difference between heaven and earth, like the difference between a 6-year-old child and a 20-year-old strong man. Good. I'll help you, Sister Yushi. I hope you will fulfill your promise when the time comes. The mountain-gazing tower master laughed and stretched out his hand to summon a carpet-like magic weapon, then went over to Yushi's waist and jumped into the sky. Yushi was a little panicked by the sudden action of the mountain-gazing tower master and subconsciously wanted to avoid him, but thinking that she would marry this old man after this matter. Although she was still extremely disgusted by the mountain-gazing tower master, she accepted her fate and no longer resisted. She only said with some concern, "You're not thinking of flying to the Great Snow Mountain on the magic carpet, are you? Although you have reached the Finger Profound realm, the journey from Mount Xianhuang to the Great Snow Mountain is not close. When the time comes, your true essence will be severely depleted, and you will only be able to use 70 to 80% of your strength." "Huh, Sister Yushi, you haven't married me yet, and you're already concerned about me? But please rest assured, although using this magic weapon to fly will consume a lot of true essence, I am now at the Finger Profound realm, and my true chi is abundant, so consuming a little is not a problem. Moreover, even if I can only use 30% of my strength, it will be enough to help you fight the enemy." Hearing the words of the mountain-gazing tower master, Yushi opened her mouth, but hesitated. She wanted to say that the young man was not ordinary, but if she said that, the mountain-gazing tower master would not be happy. Moreover, although the mountain-gazing tower master was a little arrogant, his strength was really powerful. Before he broke through to the Finger Profound realm, he was already an old devil, and now that he had broken through to the Finger Profound realm, he was even more powerful. Her worries were indeed unnecessary. Under the snowy mountain, Li Changsheng looked at the dazzling light barrier in front of him. He raised his fist and punched out in a probing manner. Bang! The second elder and the upper echelons of the Snow God Temple all stared at the spirit array. With a fist passed, the spirit array shook constantly. After a few breaths, Li Changsheng withdrew his fist, but the spirit array was still intact. The sword Dao spirit array was intact, and the second elder's clothes were fluttering in the wind, his face full of arrogance. The Snow God Temple powerhouses looked at the ordinary face on the mountain path with sarcasm. "I thought it was a figure at the peak of the Vajra realm, but now it seems that it is just SOSO. The second elder's voice came with a little disdain. He had mobilized so many people just to block the young man for half an hour, but now it seemed that even if the palace lord did not ask for help, the young man would not be able to break the defense of the spirit array. However, his complacency did not last long. In the next moment, he saw Li Changsheng take a step forward, and the fist in his hand smashed out again, and it seemed to be much stronger than before. Bang! The light shield was still swaying, but the spirit array was still intact. But then Li Changsheng threw out a third and fourth punch, each punch faster than the last, and the power of each punch was stronger than the previous one. Dong, 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 dong. It was like the sound of drums in front of tens of thousands of soldiers, and it shook people's souls. Finally, when the 13th punch was thrown, the power of this punch had reached a terrifying level. Under this punch, the entire Great Snow Mountain was shaking violently, and the stones were flying in the air, and the ground cracked. The people of the Snow God Temple who were standing proudly on the mountain peak swayed left and right, and there was a look of horror in their eyes. The swaying light shield finally could not hold on any longer, and as the fist fell, it shattered. Chapter 573. The people of the Snow God's palace thought that the array was impregnable, but when the first punch was thrown out, they did not even feel much of a shock. Was this all that the young man who could send the first elder flying with one punch was capable of? It seemed that he was not even worthy of their attention. But when the punch was thrown out one after another, they realized that the second punch was stronger than the first, and the third punch was stronger than the second. By the time all 13 punches were thrown together, the power of the punch was no less than the power of a nuclear missile explosion. Rumbling sounds continued as the formation instantly shattered and fell apart. The balls of flowing light dissipated into the world along with the punch. The people of the Snow God's palace were completely exposed in front of Li Changsheng. One punch was enough to shake the mountain. If they were onlookers, they would have praised the young man's punch, saying that it was powerful enough to split the sky and the earth. It was fierce, and carefree. As Li Changsheng's enemies, the people at the top of the mountain, all turned purple. It was a sad thing for the Snow God's palace to encounter such a powerful enemy. What should we do? Even the usually confident second elder was sweating profusely at this moment. Palace Master has been gone for 10 minutes. We only need to stop him for 20 more minutes. When a master of Guanshan Tower arrives, the snow god's palace will no longer have to be afraid of this young man. The second elder seemed to be cheering for the people around him, but it was more like he was cheering for himself. But can we really stop him for 20 minutes? Another elder, whose status in the sect was lower than the second elder's, said worriedly. Everyone in the snow god palace knew how powerful the mountain guarding matrix was, yet it had been smashed to pieces by a single punch. Although they were immortals in the eyes of many ordinary people, compared to the mountain guarding matrix, their mountain guarding matrix was far inferior. How could it withstand the young man's fist? It's only 20 minutes. You good for nothing. It was an old man with white hair and beard. He was wearing an ancient robe, but there was a powerful aura between his eyebrows. As soon as he stepped out, even the second elder had to salute him with cupped hands. The only great elder of Snow God Palace was very strong. He had been invited by the second elder and had been watching the battle from the beginning to the end. At this moment, he was undoubtedly the mainstay of Snow God Palace. He was the backbone of everyone. This young man can break the formation of my Snow God Palace. He is indeed very powerful. Even I dare not say that I can beat him. But if I can't even hold him off for 20 minutes, then all my years of cultivation will have been for naught. And all of you all shrink back when you're in trouble. My Snow God Palace's combined attack formation, as long as you all concentrate your spiritual energy on me. Even if I can't compare to the mountain viewing tower master who has entered the mysterious finger realm, I can still reach the peak of the Vajra realm. I might not lose to him. As soon as the old man finished speaking, the eyes of the people of Snow God Palace lit up. Yes, they were scared off by the young man's punch that broke the formation. At this moment, there was a great elder who was close to the peak of the Vajra realm, 5 other Vajra realm masters, 12 Khanate realm masters, and nearly 500 disciples of Snow God Palace. With such a powerful force, how could they not deal with the guy who dared to come to Snow God Palace and show off? One word could make a country prosper. One word could make people's low morale rise instantly. All disciples of Snow God Palace, listen to my command. Assemble. The great elder ordered. The originally messy formation instantly began to move quickly and finally formed a special pattern. Looking from afar, one could see wisps of aura rising up like the rising sun. It was like an ancient military formation, mighty and murderous. This was the so-called unity of will. Wisps of aura rose and circulated in the air, and finally turned into a snow dragon that was hundreds of feet long in the sky. It roared and suddenly merged into the body of the great elder. In an instant, the great elder's aura rose and rose into the sky. It was as if the whole sky was filled with the roar of a tiger and the sound of thunder. What a magnificent scene! Lu Bai, who was next to Li Changsheng, looked at the scene at the top of the mountain and could not help but be excited. No matter how scheming and selfish he usually was, he was still proud to be a disciple of the Snow God's Palace at this moment. What? Do you want to form the formation at the top of the mountain and gather the power of Snow God Palace to fight against me? Li Changxing turned back and smiled at Lu Bai. But the smile was as bright as the sun, and Lu Bai felt like a basin of ice water had been poured over him. He suddenly woke up. The young man in front of him still controlled his life and death. One word from the young man could make him explode into a cloud of blood mist. Seeing Lu Bai like a cicada in winter, Li Changsheng just gently turned his head and looked at the top of the mountain. Then he stepped out and flew into the sky like a big bird. Under his feet, dense cracks had already appeared, and the surrounding area of several tens of meters had sunk by more than half a meter. Originally, the people of Snow God Palace thought that the formation would be enough to stop Li Changsheng. But at this moment, when they saw the cracks under their feet, they could not help but gasp. Only then did they realize that Li Changsheng did not fly in the air with any immortal celestial artifact, nor did he reach the great path of Earth Immortals. He just relied on most powerful brute force to fly in the air. Can the Snow God Palace's combined attack formation really stop him? Lu Bai had doubts in his heart. Even if it could stop him, could it kill him? It should be known that being able to stop a warrior and being able to defeat a warrior were two different concepts, and being able to defeat and being able to kill were two different concepts. In Liu Bai's view, whether the combined attack formation on a mountain could stop Li Changsheng was still unknown. As for defeating Li Changsheng, it would be impossible unless a finger-profound realm warrior intervened. In the world of cultivation in the northern region, the only finger-profound realm warrior was the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord. Of course, Liu Bai did not know that the Palace Lord of Snow God Palace had gone to the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord for help. But even if they could defeat Li Changsheng, if they could not kill him and offend such a powerful warrior, Snow God Palace would probably never have a peaceful day unless there was a finger-profound realm warrior in the Snow God Palace. Liu Bai's heart was a mess, and the Palace Lord of Snow God Palace was also aware of this, which was why she was willing to marry the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord. Once she married the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord, Snow God Palace and the Mountain Viewing Tower would be one family, and they would no longer have to worry about the young warrior's revenge. It was just that the idea was often beautiful, but the reality was often cruel. Could the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord, who was regarded as their savior, really deal with Li Changsheng? Liu Bai thought it was possible. The Palace Lord of Snow God Palace, Yushi, also thought it was possible, and even everyone in Snow God Palace, including the Mountain Viewing Tower Lord, thought so. But most of the I think in the world were often wrong. Chapter 574. Li Changsheng ascended the mountain with a single step. He did not rely on any magical artifacts. He relied purely on his physical strength. He was like an arrow that had been shot from a bow. There was no elegance in his movements, but no one dared to underestimate the aura that came with his body as he broke through the air. On the top of the mountain, the disciples of the Snow God's Palace looked at the bird-like figure with mixed feelings. It was this young man who had shaken the entire Snow God's Palace by himself and brought disaster to the Snow God's Palace. At that moment, the utmost exalted elder, the second elder, and the other upper echelons all sneered. Leaping to the top of the mountain with pure physical strength seemed very shocking, but the consumption of true qi and strength was definitely not small. To do this before the battle, Li Changsheng was either too arrogant to take the people of the Snow God's Palace seriously, or he wanted to shock the people of the Snow God's Palace for fame. But this kind of shock was undoubtedly stupid in the eyes of the highest elder. Kid, do you really think the Snow God's Palace is easy to bully? If the highest elder with white hair and beard didn't have the murderous look in his eyes, he would be regarded as a deity. But it was because of his unapproachable aura and the contrast of the disciples of the Snow God's Palace that made him even more dazzling. He was like a demon slayer general. So the disciples of the Snow God's Palace who were afraid of Li Changsheng were full of confidence for no reason. Li Changsheng, who had reached the top of the mountain, stood firmly on a rock and looked at the people of the Snow God's Palace who were waiting for him. The corners of his mouth curled up, but there was a hint of disdain in his smile. It was not the first time he had destroyed a sect. When he had just recovered some of his strength, he had destroyed the Mount Hua sect. Now that he had entered the finger-profound realm, there were not many people in the world who were worthy of his punches. As for the small Snow God's Palace, it was just overkill. I, Li Changsheng, am not an unreasonable person. Give Luodan to me, and the palace master of the Snow God's Palace will come personally to apologize. I don't want to kill more people. The young man's voice was transmitted with the wind at the top of the mountain. There was no nervousness before the battle, and there was not much murderous intent. He just wanted to give the people of the Snow God's Palace a way out. However, his sudden act of kindness completely infuriated the Grand Supreme Elder. Bullshit. You're just an outer sect disciple, but you came to the Snow God Palace. That's a huge grudge, and you want the palace master to apologize to you? Who do you think you are? Then there's no room for discussion. Li Changsheng shook his head. Some people always turn a deaf ear to the kindness of others. The Supreme Elder speaking to Li Changsheng revealed a joyful expression. Originally, he was worried that Li Changsheng would start the battle as soon as he came up. At that time, he wasn't sure how long he would be able to block Li Changsheng. However, Now that Li Changsheng had spoken for 5 to 6 minutes, he only needed to wait for another 10 minutes. Wouldn't it be easy for all the disciples of the Snow God's Palace to do it in 10 minutes? However, just as this thought arose in his mind, he saw Li Changsheng walking towards him step by step. Since you won't let him go or apologize, I'll use my fist to reason with you. When he was less than 10 steps away from the Supreme Elder, Li Changsheng finally stopped. He then took a deep breath and slowly got into an attacking posture. The Supreme Elder's eyes were even more joyful. After this delay, another 2 minutes had passed. In his heart, he felt that the outcome was already set. Everyone around also let out a long sigh of relief. As long as the palace master returned, the mountain watching tower master arrived, and with the formation of the Snow God's Palace, this young man was no different from a dead man in their eyes. Time ticked by, but Li Changsheng wasn't in a hurry to throw a punch. "Young man, are you afraid of my current strength? Is that why you don't dare punch? You're such a coward." The Supreme Elder laughed heartily, and the seriousness in his eyes gradually turned into contempt. However, just as he finished speaking, he saw the young man slowly raise his fist. The moment he opened his palm, the whistling wind on the top of the mountain stopped abruptly. The whole world seemed to have fallen into silence at this moment. The Supreme Elder of the Snow God's Palace, who originally had a look of contempt on his face, faded little by little. The momentum on his body gradually condensed and turned into a white snow dragon behind him. Boom! Like a bolt from the blue, there was a loud noise. In the sky, as Li Changsheng opened his palm, a huge palm print condensed into the shape of a mountain and river in the center of the palm. The giant palm print. The moment the palm print formed, the Supreme Elder finally couldn't help but step forward and punch out first. The white snow dragon roared out with his fist and rushed straight up. The silence was broken. The snow on a mountain peak flew and formed a tornado. However, the huge fist power and raging wind only raged under the cover of the palm. There seemed to be an invisible barrier outside the palm that separated the world and controlled the universe. Li Changsheng's palm suddenly pressed down. It was as if he was carrying the weight of a mountain and the sky on his back. Whether it was the wind, snow, or the fist power that rushed into the sky, they were directly smashed the moment they touched the palm. Under his palm, he was the master of the universe. He could control the world in his palm as he pleased. This was the profoundness of this divine ability. It could isolate a space from this world, turning this world into a small universe. In the small universe, the spellcaster was the creator. Any primordial chi rules were set by the spellcaster and had to listen to the spellcaster's orders. Therefore, under the palm, the combined attack set up by hundreds of disciples of the Snow God's Palace shattered. The Supreme Elder, who had countless chi forces converging on him, was bleeding under the strong pressure. Boom! It was a huge roar. When Li Changsheng's palm pressed down inch by inch, there were disciples of the Snow God's Palace who couldn't bear the pressure and exploded into clouds of blood mist. Even the elders with profound Tao techniques were coughing up blood. Blood was seeping out of every pore of the Grand Elder's body. If Li Changsheng's palm pressed down another meter, the 500 disciples of the Snow God's Palace and a dozen elders would completely disappear from the world. Lu Bai, who had caught up from behind, saw the scene of the palm pressing down. He clenched his teeth and was full of grief and fear. Li Changsheng was able to easily gain the upper hand in the battle formation formed by all the forces of the Snow God Palace, and the young man was still calm. "Stop!" A clear voice came from afar. 2 figures flew over from the horizon. Lu Bai, who had been in despair, suddenly raised his head. The many senior members of the Snow God's Palace who were pressed under the palm finally regained their vitality and hope. Yu Shi, the palace master of the Snow God's Palace, finally came back with reinforcements before the Snow God's Palace was wiped out. Chapter 575. On the top of the mountain, there were 2 figures flying quickly. Only when they got closer could they see that they were standing on a flying carpet. One of them was a woman who was as beautiful as a flower. Although the man next to her didn't look old, his appearance and temperament didn't match the woman. The shout just now came from the woman. She went quickly and came back quickly, but she still almost killed the 100 disciples of the snow god's palace. The people of the snow god's palace kept exploding under the hands of the young man. Because the appearance of Palace Master Yu Shi and Taoist Guan Shan distracted part of Li Chongqing's attention, they were able to catch their breath. But even so, their bodies still felt like they were being cut into pieces. This young man, who they looked down on several times, made them suffer. Boy, let go of the disciples of the snow god's palace. I will cut you into pieces. No matter how beautiful a woman was, when vicious words came out of her mouth, it was difficult for her to make others feel pleasant. Li Chongqing didn't care about the woman's threat at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Even if I let them go, would you let me go?" This sentence made Yu Shi speechless. Indeed, because of what Li Chongqing did, she didn't hesitate to marry the Mountain View House Master, who she didn't like. Because of this, even if Li Chongqing knelt on the ground and begged for mercy, she wouldn't hesitate to slap him on the head and kill this hateful young man on the snowy peak. The snowy peak, which was covered in snow all year round, looked white and flawless, but the snow god's palace had been stained with blood for hundreds of years. Let the people of the snow god's palace go. Let me fight you. The Mountain View House Master put away the flying carpet under his feet and looked at Li Chongqing quietly with one hand behind his back. The wind on the top of the mountain blew his clothes, and he had the temperament of a master. Even Yu Shi had to admit that although the Mountain View House Master looked ordinary, he was worthy of being the #1 cultivator in the Northern Lands. He had some manly charm. Why should I let them go just because you asked me to? Li Chongqing's eyes were filled with mockery. If Li Chongqing's words could still keep the Mountain Watching Tower Master from getting angry in order to maintain his image, he was completely enraged by Li Chongqing's spittle and the way he crushed more than a dozen disciples of the snow god's palace without hesitation. Poochie, poochie. It sounded like a popping balloon. However, every crisp sound was accompanied by a snow god palace disciple turning into a bloody mist. Human lives were like grass, as easy as crushing an ant. The palace master of the snow god temple, Yu Shi's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, and her pretty face was slightly distorted. Tower Master, you have to uphold justice for me. Yu Shi looked pitifully at the mountain-gazing edifice lord. In fact, even if she did not make such an expression, the mountain-viewing Tower Master would not be able to tolerate such provocation. Brat, you're courting death. He finally took a step forward, and a long, narrow sword appeared in his hand at some unknown time. Facing the mountain wind, he slashed directly at Li Chongqing. This slash was more like a master than his previous pretense, and the wind at the top of the mountain became stronger in an instant. What a powerful sword light! Yu Shi was secretly surprised by the cultivation of the Mountain View House Master, but at the same time, she breathed a sigh of relief. She was afraid that the Mountain View House Master, who had been promoted to the #1 cultivator in the Northern Lands, would not be a match for the young man. Sure enough, in the face of this slash, Li Chongqing's huge palm that was originally pressing on the heads of the Snow God's Palace disciples disappeared instantly, as if he was afraid of the attack of the Mountain View House Master. Huh, brat, it's a little too late to withdraw your attack now. The Mountain View House Master's eyes were also filled with pride. This slash was called cutting snow, and it was a unique move created by the mind after breaking through to the finger profound realm. Under the sky, full of snowflakes, with one slash, the snowflakes within 10 miles disappeared, as if they were all cut by the sword Qi, as if they were condensed into a thread. He did not dare to cut a peak like the Big Snow Peak, but he could cut an ordinary small mountain in half. This was the power of the finger profound realm. Moving the mountains and draining the seas had already begun to take shape. But the moment he slashed down, what he saw was the young man's slightly mocking smile. Before he could understand the meaning of that smile, a huge fist had already met the blade. He was using his flesh and blood to resist this powerful slash. The Mountain View House Master only felt that his heart was filled with a sense of absurdity. Even if it was a finger-profound realm cultivator who was at the same level as him, he would not dare to do this. Is this brat crazy? But he soon found out the answer. The moment the fist collided with the long blade that had condensed into a thread, the surging wind and snow suddenly stopped. The sharp blade created a series of sparks on the fist. Then the violent wind and snow that had originally stopped suddenly moved again, with an even greater momentum than before. Following this vigorous punch, it was as if an angry dragon in the sea had rolled up a 10,000-foot-tall wave and had unreasonably slapped over. The fist was like a dragon, and the wind was like a wave. This punch condensed the wind power of the entire mountain peak and instantly shattered the condensed blade chi. It collided with the long and narrow blade, and also with the Mountain View House Master's chest. Bang! The long blade flew high into the sky, and then shattered with a bang, as if it scattered and fell to the ground. Some were stuck on rocks, and some were stuck in the depths of the snow. The Mountain View House Master's chest instantly became a bloody mess, and fresh blood drew a shocking arc in the sky. He flew back nearly 100 meters and fell to the ground. His relatively young face began to gradually become old, and his eyes were full of shock. The people of the Snow God's Palace who had escaped from Li Changxing's hands had thought that they had seen their savior, and that they had survived a disaster. At this moment, their hearts, which had just been put down, were once again in suspense, and their hearts were filled with fear. Only people who had died once understood the fear of death better, and did not want to die even more. Yushi bit her lip. Along the way, the Mountain View House Master had said a lot of bold words to her, and the general meaning was that she did not need to take the young man seriously. He had already entered the finger-profound realm and was unparalleled in the northern land, and even in the entire Huaxia cultivation world, he was second to none. If she married him, she would be the high and mighty wife of the Mountain View House Master. The reputation of the Snow God's Palace would also be further improved. So much so that she, who did not have a good impression of the Mountain View House Master, began to accept him as her husband willingly. She even began to look forward to the scene of her bringing the Snow God's Palace to greater heights, and thought that she would be the master of the Snow God's Palace's revival. But who would have thought that just as they returned to the top of the mountain, the heroic Mountain View House Master would be beaten like a dog in the water, and the hundreds of people of the Snow God's Palace could be reduced to ashes at any time. Thinking about how she had punished that outer sect disciple, she really regretted it now. Chapter 576. The wind on the mountain was howling. Li Changxing's punch had caused the Mountain View Tower Master to spit out blood, and the people of the Snow God's Palace were filled with despair. Looking at the Mountain View Tower Master who had smashed a hole in the ground in the distance, Li Changxing walked towards him step by step. All of a sudden, the surrounding environment dimmed. Above their heads, a huge curtain covered the sky, and under the blowing mountain wind, it looked like a huge kite. Looking closely, it was the flying carpet that the Mountain View Tower Master had stepped on, but it was dozens of times bigger than before. Everyone couldn't help but look up at the sky and saw the enlarged flying carpet suddenly fall, aiming in the direction of Li Changxing. Boom! It was unknown whether it was the sound of the wind and the flying carpet rubbing against each other, or the sound of the flying carpet squeezing the air. It fell directly and covered Li Changxing. At that moment, Li Changxing seemed to have come to another space, and felt a terrifying force squeezing him from all directions. This was actually similar to Li Changxing's giant palm print. Huh! The Mountain View Tower Master staggered to his feet, and his eyes showed a carefree look. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to break through my carpet world. The flying carpet was a spatial magic treasure that the Mountain View Tower Master had inadvertently obtained in an ancient ruin. It was very handy for storing things and killing enemies. The people of the Snow God's Palace, who had been in despair, all let out a long sigh of relief when they saw that the almost invincible young man was trapped. Tower Master, he won't break out of this flying carpet, will he? Yushi thought of the young man's strength and still had some lingering fear. This is a high-grade magic tool. If this young man had dodged it in time, none of us would have been able to stop him with his strength. However, he was so careless that he allowed my flying carpet to envelop him. He's dead for sure. Right at this moment, a walla sound was heard. Then, a hole suddenly appeared on the flying carpet that was blooming with radiance. A fist protruded from a hole, and the hole grew larger and larger. Then, a figure rushed out and stood in the air, looking coldly at the mountain viewing tower lord. The quality of his transcendent artifact is too inferior. Next time, use a sturdier one to deal with me. His voice was indifferent, but when it landed in everyone's ears, they were all extremely shocked. The mountain gazing tower master had just said how powerful his Dharma treasure was, and then his flying carpet was broken just like that. I really underestimated you. The mountain gazing tower master narrowed his eyes and slowly raised his hand. A bronze mirror the size of a palm appeared in his hand. The surface of the bronze mirror was engraved with ancient patterns. The moment he raised it, everyone could feel countless spiritual energy gathering towards the bronze mirror in his hand. A top-grade magic artifact. This time, even Li Changsheng was rather surprised. He thought to himself, no wonder this mountain-gazing house lord is so famous in the cultivation world of the north. He must have had quite a fortuitous encounter. Everyone from the snow god's palace looked expectant. The mountain-gazing tower master might be able to turn the situation around with this mirror. As the light on the bronze mirror grew brighter and brighter, a powerful aura began to spread out. Kid, take this. Let's see if you can block it. The mountain-gazing tower master roared, and a beam of light shot out from the bronze mirror, rushing towards Li Changsheng. It was white, like the Milky Way falling from the sky, and it was very powerful. Li Changsheng looked at the beam of light that was whizzing down, and there was a hint of suspicion in his eyes. He raised his fist and punched out. Suddenly, the beam of light was smashed into countless fireflies, scattering in all directions. While Li Changsheng was punching out to deal with the beam of light, the mountain-gazing tower master had already turned into a blur and rushed down the mountain. A smokescreen, a bluff. Li Changsheng did not expect that the mountain-gazing tower master's last move was just to confuse him. The people from the snow god's palace, who had originally been hopeful, understood at this moment, and they all looked defeated. The mountain-gazing tower master had run away. You want to run? It's not that easy. Li Changsheng's lips curled into a cold smile. A small sword flew out of his hand and suddenly became bigger. He stepped on the flying sword and chased in the direction of the mountain-gazing tower master. His figure drew a white line in the sky, and his speed was so fast that the people on the mountain top could not catch him. The mountain-gazing tower master, who had already reached the foot of the mountain, had just smiled when he felt a sudden warning in his heart. He instinctively rolled forward like a donkey. He saw that the sword light had blasted a deep hole in the place where he had just been. Li Changsheng was standing less than 5 meters away from him, looking at him coldly. Are you a swordsman? The mountain-gazing tower master's heart was pounding. If he had not dodged quickly enough, he would have been pierced through the heart. But now he did not even think about running away, because it was obvious that he, who had lost his flying carpet, could not compete with Li Changsheng in terms of speed. Kid, do you really want to force me to die with you? I'm a mysterious finger realm cultivator. If I reverse my meridians and self-destruct my body, I can destroy half of your cultivation no matter how strong you are. Then do you think it's possible for me to let you go just like that? Li Changsheng smiled, his eyes full of mockery. As long as you're willing to let me go, I can give you this bronze mirror. This is a supreme grade artifact I obtained from an ancient ruin. It has both offensive and defensive capabilities. How about it? You and I have no grievances in the past, nor do we have any enmity today. You won't lose anything by exchanging a supreme grade artifact for my life, and I promise that I will never be your enemy in the future. The mountain-gazing tower master stared at Li Changsheng. He was the #1 cultivator in the northern lands, but he was unlucky enough to meet Li Changsheng. He could neither beat him nor run away, so he could only lower his head and beg for mercy. All right, Since you're so sincere, then leave the bronze mirror behind, and you can leave." Li Changxing nodded, and the mountain gazing tower master was overjoyed. He threw the mirror to Li Changsheng. "The reason why I call myself a mountain gazing tower master is because this mirror is called the mountain gazing mirror. It can monitor the fate of the mountain range, and it can easily find spiritual items such as dragon veins. It's because of this mirror that I can break through to the mysterious finger realm so quickly. If you want this mirror to recognize you as its master, it's actually very simple. I've already removed the restriction on my body. You only need to drip a drop of blood, and you can use this mirror as you wish." Li Changxing nodded. He really cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood on it. However, the moment the blood touched the surface of the mirror suddenly shook violently, and then a terrifying energy was released from it. "Huh, kid, you're still too young. You've fallen into my trap. What mountain-gazing mirror? This is just a type of 5 elements divine lightning. With the guidance of my blood, you're destined to be blown to ashes." The mountain-gazing tower master stomped on the ground and quickly distanced himself from Li Changxing. However, that fake mountain-gazing mirror seemed to have grown out of Li Changxing's body, sticking to Li Changxing's hand. He couldn't shake it off even if he wanted to. The energy inside was becoming more and more terrifying, and it could explode at any moment. Chapter 577. The situation at the scene was reversed in an instant. Li Changsheng, who had the absolute upper hand and was in control of the situation, fell into the mountain viewing tower lord's trap in an instant. The energy contained in the fake mountain mirror had not been released yet, but it was already terrifying. The mountain viewing tower lord, who had quickly distanced himself from Li Changsheng, stopped 100 meters away and stared coldly at Li Changsheng. Originally, even if he had tricked Li Changsheng with the fake mountain viewing mirror, it would not have been so easy to kill Li Changsheng. After all, with the strength that Li Changsheng had shown, he could have dodged before the mountain viewing mirror exploded. Perhaps he would have only suffered some minor injuries, and Li Changsheng's combat strength would not have been affected much. But the other party was stupid enough to listen to him and use the method of dripping his blood on the fake mountain viewing mirror. This caused the fake mountain viewing mirror to lock onto Li Changsheng's body through the faint connection between his essence blood and his body, making it impossible for him to dodge. The divine thunder that he had refined for more than 10 years, thinking that he would only use it at the most dangerous moment, finally came in handy. Killing a finger-profound realm cultivator who was stronger than him, the mountain viewing tower lord felt excited just thinking about it. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too stupid, the mountain viewing tower lord said sinisterly. On the top of the mountain, Yushi and the other higher-ups also flew halfway up the mountain to watch from afar. Even as Li Changxing's enemies, they could not help but sigh in their hearts. It was a pity that such a young expert died under the mountain viewing tower lord scheme. Of course, pity was pity, but it was better that Li Changsheng died. If he died, the snow god's palace would be free of worries. Bang! On the fake mountain viewing mirror in Li Changxing's hand, dense cracks began to appear. Terrifying energy spread out from inside, making everyone feel extremely depressed. Then the cracks on the mirror grew bigger and bigger, and the energy inside rushed out in a rush. The surrounding void began to tremble. However, just as the terrifying energy was about to be completely released, a layer of light suddenly appeared on Li Changxing's palm. Then, the purple light formed a spherical cover that covered the mountain view mirror. The moment the cover was fully formed, the fake mountain observation mirror also exploded. It was a pity that when the surging energy came into contact with the transparent cover, it was like a surging flood meeting the world's strongest dam. The energy that could even shake the void could only move left and right inside the cover. Half a minute later, the explosive energy gradually calmed down. With a flip of Li Changxing's hand, the transparent cover finally disappeared. Just like that, a violent explosion was resolved by Li Changsheng with a loud, thunder-like sound and small raindrops. How is this possible? The mountain-gazing housemaster was dumbfounded. He mumbled to himself in disbelief. He had calculated everything, but he did not expect Li Changxing's strength to be so high that even the 5 elements thunder he refined could not do anything. The hearts of the people of Snow God Palace fell to the bottom. Li Changxing's strength was incredible. Boy, you're good. At this moment, the mountain-gazing house master no longer had the courage to fight Li Changxing. He turned around and was about to escape. However, just as he moved, his vision blurred. Li Changxing had already appeared in front of him. He suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed his neck. At this moment, the mountain-gazing house master felt that the surrounding air was extremely sticky. It was as if it turned into a cage, making him unable to move. You want to play tricks with me? Unfortunately, you're not strong enough. No matter how good your plan is, it's useless. Now you can die. Li Changxing's hand gradually tightened. The mountain-gazing house master's neck had already made a crack sound. His neck was about to be broken. Li, I admit that you're strong, but you can dissolve the energy of my 5 elements thunder explosion. Can you dissolve the energy of a Finger Profound Realm Master's self-destruction? The Finger Profound Realm was also known as the Immortal Realm or the Immortal Realm. In ancient times, such a master could fight against a country alone. They were high above and looked down on thousands of rivers and mountains. They were already able to control the heaven and earth yuan qi, and their entire bodies were like a small world. Once they chose to self-destruct, the energy produced would probably be able to flatten this large, snowy mountain. Even Finger Profound Realm experts who were at the same level as him would also be blown into ashes. As soon as the mountain-gazing house master finished speaking, a terrifying aura began to circulate in his body. Light kept flowing all over his body, as if he would explode at any time. His eyes were fixed on Li Changxing, full of hatred and coldness. On the snow mountain, the people of Snow God Palace also showed despair in their eyes. A Finger Profound Realm Master's self-destruction would destroy everything within dozens of miles under the violent aura. The mountains and rivers would be flattened. In other words, Li Changxing would all die. Seeing that the energy in the mountain-gazing house master's body was becoming more and more chaotic, Li Changxing's palm did not loosen at all. You forced me. The mountain-gazing house master roared, and the energy in his body surged out. However, Li Changxing's mouth showed a few traces of mockery. Then, the energy that seemed to be about to explode suddenly stopped. He looked at Li Changxing in disbelief, and there was fear in his eyes. You won't let go of me, even when I self-destruct. How can there be a person like you in this world? Indeed, the mountain-gazing house master's so-called self-destruction was just a way to escape. As long as Li Changxing did not dare to die with him, and let go of his neck before he self-destructed, and chose to escape the vortex of the explosion, he could take the opportunity to escape with the substitution technique. He never thought that Li Changxing would be indifferent from the beginning to the end. This went against common sense. Huh? Li Changxing laughed disdainfully. Master the mountain-gazing tower, you've really put in a lot of effort to survive. However, how could someone who cherishes life as much as you be willing to perish together with me? Besides, do you really think that you can perish together with me by blowing yourself up? Li Changxing suddenly clenched his fist. This time, the mountain-gazing house master discovered in horror that the genuine qi in his body was like a frozen river and could not be circulated at all. Then, Li Changxing suddenly punched his lower abdomen. Bang! It was a loud noise. He felt that his internal organs were shattered by this punch, and at the same time, a simple and unadorned little mirror was sent flying by the punch, and Li Changxing easily caught it in his hand. This was the real mountain-gazing mirror. Not bad. Li Changxing casually threw the half-dead mountain-gazing house master to the ground, and carefully looked at the mirror in his hand. At this moment, the mountain-gazing house master was already on the verge of death, and he looked at Li Changxing with pleading eyes. Since you already have the mountain-gazing mirror, please have mercy and spare me. Before he could finish speaking, Li Changxing had already stepped on his head, and that head was like a watermelon that was run over by a big car wheel, and with a puff sound, it turned into a cloud of blood mist. The mountain-gazing house master, who had just broken through to the profound finger realm and was known as the #1 cultivator in the northern land, was destroyed in body and soul just like that. Halfway up the mountain, the people of Snow God's palace who saw this scene were all trembling. When Li Changsheng put away the mirror and turned his head, the people of Snow God's palace all knelt on the ground, their eyes full of fear. Chapter 578. Even the master of Mountain View House, who was known as the #1 cultivator in the northern region, had died at the hands of Li Changsheng. The people of Snow God's palace were completely terrified and had no strength to resist. At the beginning, Li Changsheng had shown that he was invincible, but the people of Snow God's palace still had a little hope that the master of Mountain View House could turn the tables. Now, with the death of the master of Mountain View House, that little hope was completely snuffed out. How can this young man be so powerful? He's not even 20 years old, but his strength is unfathomable. The palace master of Snow God's palace, Yushi, the supreme elder, and the second elder were all kneeling on the ground at this moment. Li Changsheng walked toward them step by step. Although there was a distance of a few hundred meters between them, Li Changsheng took a single step and arrived in front of them in just 5 steps. It was as if the ground had shrunk to an inch. Don't you think it's a little too late to kneel now? Li Changsheng's eyes were a little cold. He didn't deliberately release his aura, but with the power that had just crushed the master of Mountain View House, it had already made the people of Snow God's palace feel suffocated. Looking at the people of Snow God's palace trembling in front of him, Li Changsheng's eyes didn't have the slightest pity, only coldness. Please be merciful and spare my life. Please let the people of Snow God's palace go. Yushi raised her head. There was a trace of panic and fear on her cold face at this moment. With her arrogant personality, it was impossible for her to even smile at people, let alone kneel and beg for mercy. But now, in front of Li Changsheng, she had no courage. Even a master of Mountain View House could be stomped to death, so who could escape? Spare the people of Snow God's palace. Ha ha. What were you doing? Luo Dan helped you find a dragon pearl and should have been promoted to an inner disciple. But because she didn't want to marry someone else as a concubine, she was imprisoned by you. I came to seek justice for her, but you racked your brains to kill me. Tell me, what reason do I have to spare you? Li Changsheng slowly raised his palm, and a powerful aura spread out from his body. This power pressed down like a mountain. Yushi, who was kneeling at the front, suffered the most. A trace of blood leaked out from the corner of her mouth. She said in a trembling voice, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I'm willing to admit my mistakes and pay any price. Please don't kill me. Li Changsheng's face was cold and indifferent. He only pressed his palm down again. Puchi. The sound of bones breaking rang out from Yushi's body, and her face was as white as a sheet of paper. She couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and under the powerful pressure, she fell to the ground with a plop. The people of the Snow God Palace behind him were not faring any better. They were all struggling under the immense pressure. Are you really going to kill them all? Yushi clenched her teeth, her pure white teeth stained red with blood. She glared at Li Changsheng, her body trembling uncontrollably. She no longer had that haughty and inviolable look on her face. The people of the Snow God Palace should have died, but for the sake of Luo Dan, I can spare your lives. When Li Changsheng said this, Yushi couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. You can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. I'll take away 30% of the luck of the Snow God Palace and punish each of you by dropping 1 level of martial arts, with no hope of ever rising again. Li Changsheng suddenly raised his palm, clenched it into a fist, and punched 3 times at the top of the Snow God Palace. After the 3 punches, a silver dragon appeared on the top of the Snow God Palace. The dragon was hundreds of feet long and incomparably beautiful. The moment the dragon appeared, Li Changsheng suddenly used his sword and cut the dragon in half. At the same time, he reached out and grabbed the second half of the dragon and directly swallowed it. Suddenly, Li Changsheng's aura changed, and became even more unfathomable. As for the silver dragon, after a roar, the second half of its body automatically grew out, but the whole silver dragon was much smaller than before, and the fifth claw that was about to grow had completely disappeared. The silver dragon, which had become complete again, looked at Li Changsheng with fear, and then flew into the snow mountain again. The silver dragon was the manifestation of the luck of the snow god palace, and when Li Changsheng took away a part of it, it lost 30% of its luck. Although the people of the snow god palace had already seen the power of Li Changsheng, they still couldn't help but be shocked when they saw this scene. There is such a magical power in the world that can swallow luck. It's simply unheard of. Then Li Changsheng's eyes fell on the palace lord of the snow god palace again. Before they could beg for mercy, he raised his hand and turned it into a huge handprint and slammed it down. Bang! Under the palm. It seemed to be majestic, but when it landed on the ground, the people present didn't feel much. Is this young man just scaring us? Has he decided to stop and forgive us? Just as the palace lord of the snow god palace and the others were puzzled, their bodies suddenly shook, and then their faces changed wildly. The palace lord of the snow god palace, who was originally in the Vajra realm, found that at this moment she had fallen to the innate realm. The supreme elder, second elder, and the others next to her also had an extremely ugly look on their faces. The realm that the martial artists worked so hard to cultivate was cut off just like that. And at that time, Li Changsheng said that one realm would be cut off, and they would never be able to advance in their cultivation. In other words, they were completely cut off. Although he didn't kill them, it was no different from taking away half of their lives. One sword cut off 30% of the luck of the snow god palace, and one palm cut off the cultivation path of the people of the snow god palace. How could there be such a terrifying person in the world? Take me to see Luo Dan. Li Changsheng completely ignored the sadness on the faces of Yu Shi and the others, and said coldly. Hearing Li Changsheng's words, Yu Shi's body didn't move. At this moment, she hated Li Changsheng to the bone. I know you want to cut me into pieces now, but if you don't want to die, lead the way. Li Changsheng's eyes flashed a cold light. He didn't kill them, but if the other party still didn't know what was good for her, he didn't mind staining his hands with blood and giving her a quick death. Yu Shi raised her head and glared at Li Changsheng with bitter resentment. But the moment she came into contact with Li Changsheng's indifferent eyes, she couldn't help but tremble, as if a basin of ice water had been poured over her head, instantly sobering her up. Lead the way, I don't want to say it a second time. Li Changsheng's words fell. Yu Shi hurriedly stood up with a look of fear and said, I'll lead the way. With that, she wiped the blood from her mouth and walked up the mountain. When the two figures disappeared on the mountain path, the people of the snow god palace who were kneeling on the ground stood up one by one, looking at their current martial arts realm, and then looking at the people of the same sect next to them. The great elder couldn't help but let out a long sigh. The foundation of the snow god palace for hundreds of years, the struggle of generations, and finally a place in the cultivation world of the northern lands. Now, this great situation is all gone. I'm afraid the snow god palace can only be reduced to a second-rate sect in the future. We are the sinners of the snow god palace. The great elder looked at the sky. Tears were streaming down his face. One wrong step, and the whole game was lost. Chapter 579. In the dungeon of Snow God Palace, a granny in charge of keeping watch looked at the woman in the cell with disgust. What a wretch! It is your fortune that the head disciple of a mortal crane sect took a liking to you, but you dared to go against the sect master's orders. Do you think that finding a dragon pearl that is not a dragon pearl is enough for you? Aren't you still imprisoned here? After saying that, he stretched out his hand and formed a seal. He pointed his finger at the direction of the woman in the dungeon. In an instant, a silver-armored deity appeared with a long whip in his hand. Pop! It mercilessly hit Luo Dan's body that was getting thinner by the day. Although Luo Dan gritted her teeth, she could not help but scream in pain. This whip was called Soul Haunting Whip. It looked like it was hitting the body, but it actually affected the soul. Once the whip hit, the pain would enter the bone marrow. It was very vicious. Luo Dan and the old woman had some old grudges because the old woman's granddaughter was also an outer disciple of the snow god's palace. Coincidentally, Luo Dan brought back a frost dragon pearl for the sect, and the old woman's granddaughter also brought back a treasure. However, only one outer disciple could be promoted to inner disciple in the sect. Because the cold serpent pearl that Luo Dan brought back was of a higher grade, Luo Dan was selected to be promoted to inner disciple. This caused the old woman and her granddaughter to be overjoyed for nothing, so they bore a grudge against Luo Dan. Immediately after, the head disciple of a mortal crane sect who came to visit Snow God Palace took a liking to Luo Dan and wanted to marry her as his concubine. Originally, in the eyes of Snow God Palace, this was a good opportunity to climb up the social ladder. After all, Immortal Crane Sect was a cultivation sect on par with Snow God Palace, and the head disciple of Immortal Crane Sect was destined to inherit the position of sect master. Even if she became his concubine, her status would be much higher than that of an inner sect disciple of Snow God Palace. But Luo Dan rejected him, and thus was imprisoned in the dungeon by the furious palace master. The granny who hated Luo Dan to begin with volunteered to guard her. Thus, this vicious old woman used all sorts of methods to torture Luo Dan every day. "You wretch, are you satisfied now?" The granny bared her teeth, her eyes filled with satisfaction. Luo Dan gritted her teeth and endured it silently, her eyes filled with despair. When would these painful days come to an end? At this moment, the dungeon door suddenly opened and two figures walked in. The old woman and Luo Dan raised their heads at the same time. "Greetings, Palace Lord." When she saw Yushi come in, the old mama hurriedly went forward to salute. At the same time, she looked suspiciously at the youth standing beside Yushi. "That young man's face is dark. I wonder who he is." "He's actually on par with the palace master." "Palace Lord, this bitch is very stubborn. I whip her 300 times a day, but she still doesn't repent. If you ask me, what's the use of keeping such a traitor alive? It's better to kill her." The palace master of the Snow God's palace interrupted the old woman. "Shut up." Without waiting for the Snow God Palace master to speak, Li Changsheng had already walked towards Luo Dan. Luo Dan did not expect Li Changsheng to appear here. She looked at Li Changsheng miserably. "Why are you here?" Li Changsheng's eyes showed pity. "It's my fault. I left the talisman in your body, but it can only be activated when your life is in danger. I made you suffer so much." Li Changsheng walked to the front of the dungeon, stared at a talisman on the pillar, and pulled it down. In an instant, light waves flashed in front of his eyes and then quickly dissipated. The old mama's eyes widened. This talisman was a very important part of the dungeon's protective array. It was the eye of the array, but now it was broken so easily by the other party. "This person is so young. Who the hell is he?" Just when the old mama was shocked, Li Changsheng had already pushed open the door of the cell. The silver-armored deity, because there was no command from the old mama, was motionless with a whip in his hand. Li Changsheng raised his head and glanced at it. Suddenly, he threw out a punch. The silver-armored deity, condensed by the formation, was smashed to pieces with a single punch. He went over and helped Luo Dan up. Luo Dan's body was already weak and boneless, but now it was even lighter. Looking at Li Changsheng, his heart ached. "Let's go, I'll bring you out." Just as they were about to step out of the cell, the old mama, who was shocked by Li Changsheng's methods, reacted and suddenly blocked their way. "What are you doing? This woman's crimes are unforgivable. How can you bring her out?" Saying so, she looked at Snow God Palace's Palace Lord. "Palace Lord, Immortal Crane Sect and our Snow God Palace have always been allies." This time, this Luo Dan dared to reject the request of Immortal Crane Sect's head disciple. If he knows that we only locked her up for such a short period of time before letting her out, I'm afraid that Immortal Crane Sect's head disciple will be unhappy. When he inherits the position of sect master of Immortal Crane Sect, our alliance with Snow God Palace may be destroyed. So, Palace Lord, please reconsider." The old mama's words were filled with deep emotions, as if she was thinking for Snow God Palace. But Yushi's expression became darker and darker. It was not that she did not know of the grudge between this old mama and Luo Dan. The reason why she agreed to guard the cell was to use her to torture Luo Dan. But that was before. Now, she wanted to worship Luo Dan like a bodhisattva. Shut up. Whether we release her or not, it's not up to you to say. Saying so, Snow God Palace's palace lord stepped forward and bowed deeply to Luo Dan. The old nanny at the side was already in a daze. What's going on? But Li Changsheng sneered. You tortured Luo Dan to this extent, and you think it's over with just a bow? You're dreaming. Kneel down and apologize. What? Yushi's expression froze. She was the palace lord of Snow God Palace. Kowtowing to a disciple was worse than killing her. The old mama's eyes widened. She could not help but say, "What are you saying? You want our palace lord to apologize to this wretch? How is that possible?" And you, without waiting for Li Changsheng to speak, Yushi glared at her fiercely. "It's all your fault, old woman. I told you to guard Luo Dan, not to torture her. Go to the punishment hall and receive 300 lashes later." Hearing Yushi's words, the old mama finally knew that she kicked an iron plate. She hurriedly lowered her head and said, "Yes, Palace Lord, I was wrong." Saying so, she was about to leave the prison. "Wait a minute," Li Changsheng suddenly said. "Yushi, you're still playing tricks with me at this time. This old woman dared to torture Luo Dan, and you only punished her with 300 lashes. It seems that you really think that I, Li Changsheng, am easy to fool. Mr. Li, how do you want to punish her?" Yushi stammered. "She dared to bully my woman. Of course she's dead." Li Changsheng suddenly pointed his finger, and a sword light appeared out of thin air. Hula! The sword chi directly left a long sword mark on the ground. The old mama's eyes widened, and the expression on her face froze. Then her head rolled off her neck, and her body split from the middle. Her limbs were separated, and her body was divided into countless pieces. A sword split her body. After killing the old mama, Li Changsheng looked at Yushi. "If you don't apologize, you'll end up like her." Chapter 580. Puchi. After Li Changsheng's words fell, Yushi directly knelt on the ground without any hesitation. The killing intent in Li Changsheng's eyes did not seem fake. She did not dare to take the risk. Seeing the usually high and mighty Snow God Temple Palace Lord kneeling in front of her like this, Luo Dan did not know what to do. Did she hate Yushi? Of course she did. She went through so much trouble to bring back a cold dragon pearl, but because the first disciple of a mortal crane sect took a fancy to her, the other party wanted her to be his concubine. Just because she refused, the other party did not even mention her contributions, and instead sent her to jail. She even let that vicious granny whip her 300 times a day. Although it seemed like the granny acted on her own accord, with Luo Dan's intelligence, how could she not know that without the palace lord's instructions, she would not dare to punish her? But when Yushi really knelt in front of her, she did not know what to do. After all, she was the master of Snow God Temple, an existence that once intimidated her. So much so that when Yushi knelt in front of her and begged for forgiveness, she could not help but look at the youth beside her. It was all because of Li Changsheng that all of this had happened. As such, they should ask Li Changsheng for his opinion on what to do next. Li Changsheng didn't say anything. He didn't pay any attention to the palace master of the Snow God's palace who was kneeling there and had completely forgotten about the word dignity. He just held Luo Dan's arm with one hand and walked out of the dungeon with the other. Compared to the stifling atmosphere in the jail, although the mountain wind was blowing outside, it was slightly cold, but the air filled with freedom still made Luo Dan feel like she was reborn. "Why did you save me?" Luo Dan looked at Li Changsheng beside her. Indeed, first he gave her a priceless cold dragon pearl, and now he saved her from the jail. Why did Li Changsheng save her? Was it really because he liked her? I said before, you look very similar to an old friend of mine. Saving you today is to make up for my past regrets. Li Changsheng sighed slightly. Luo Dan looked too much like her. Their every move, every smile, and even their state of mind were similar. Really? Luo Dan smiled gently. At this moment, there was a trace of disappointment in her eyes and heart. What do you plan to do next? Do you want to stay in the snow god's palace or leave the mountain with me? Li Changxing looked at Luo Dan. As long as she nodded, he would give her everything she wanted. Luo Dan shook her head. Everything I did before was just to become an inner disciple of the snow god's palace. But suddenly, I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to go down the mountain with you. I don't want to be someone else's substitute. If one day you really want to take me away, purely because of me, Luo Dan, and not because you want to make up for your regrets, maybe I will agree. Of course, I said maybe. Then where are you going? Li Changsheng had actually expected such an answer. Go sightseeing, find a place where people rarely go, and try your luck. Maybe you'll be like the master of mountain viewing tower and become a big shot that everyone admires. But when Luo Dan said this, she couldn't help but look at Li Changsheng. By the way, the master of mountain viewing tower of the Xianhuang Mountain has always wanted to marry the palace master of the snow god's palace. I didn't expect you to crush the snow god's palace so easily, but you have to be careful of the master of mountain viewing tower. The palace master of Moon Palace isn't someone who can be easily taken advantage of. If she asks the master of mountain viewing tower, maybe you'll come. You have to be careful. The master of mountain viewing tower is recognized as the top expert in the cultivation world of the northern land. At this point, Luo Dan seemed to have thought of something. By the way, didn't the Grand Elder and the Grand Young Elder help you when you broke in a mountain? We have a very powerful mountain guarding formation and the Palace Master's strength. Luo Dan's voice grew lower and lower, and the surprise in her eyes grew stronger. When Li Changsheng broke into the Snow God's palace, the Grand Elder would have come out of seclusion no matter how urgent his cultivation was. There was also the Grand Elder and the mountain guarding formation of the Snow God's palace. The Palace Master of the Snow God's palace personally led Li Changsheng to the dungeon and rescued her. She even knelt down to apologize to her because of Li Changsheng's words. Didn't that mean that these high and mighty immortals in her heart were all under Li Changsheng's feet? Seeing Li Changsheng's half-smile, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Don't tell me the master of Mountain Viewing Tower has already come out, but he's also under your feet?" Seeing Li Changsheng nod slightly, Luo Dan's mind went blank for a moment. Luo Dan was just an ordinary outer disciple of the Snow God's palace. It took her a lot of effort to be promoted to an inner disciple. People like the Grand Elder, the Palace Master of the Snow God's palace, and the Master of Mountain Viewing Tower were all people she had to look up to. But now, Li Changsheng was above them all. Luo Dan, who came back to her senses, looked at Li Changsheng up and down, and finally couldn't help but speak. "Don't tell me you're one of the legendary old immortals. You're 700 or 800 years old, but you don't look old because of your cultivation. Otherwise, how can you explain your powerful strength at such a young age?" Seeing Luo Dan's expression gradually turn to one of awe, Li Changsheng couldn't help but feel a headache and shook his head. "Like the master of Mountain Viewing Tower, I got an opportunity. That's why I'm so powerful. Don't think too much." Li Changsheng was more than 700 or 800 years old. If Luo Dan knew his real age, would she only treat him as an old senior worthy of respect and not a lover to fall in love with? Of course, he wasn't clear about his feelings for Luo Dan. Was it just because they looked alike? Could it be that she was Luo Dan's reincarnation? Or could it be that he really had feelings for Luo Dan? Although it was very likely that the two of them were the same person, it was still different now. Really, Luo Dan's eyes were a little suspicious. A strong mountain wind blew, and her body suddenly swayed. Li Changsheng couldn't help but blame himself for being so careless. Luo Dan's martial arts strength was not high, and this time she was tortured in the dungeon. At this moment, she was even weaker than an ordinary person. He stretched out his hand and put it on Luo Dan's shoulder. Luo Dan's body suddenly shook, and then she felt as if a fire dragon was flowing through her meridians from her shoulder to the rest of her body. Not only did the cold on her body disappear, but the hidden injuries that she had suffered in the dungeon also began to recover. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before she was completely healed. "Thank you." Luo Dan smiled slightly. When Li Changsheng put his hand on her shoulder, she subconsciously wanted to avoid it. When the fire dragon went through her body, she realized that Li Changsheng wanted to help her expel the cold and heal her injuries. She had misinterpreted his meaning, and her face was slightly embarrassed. Chapter 581. Luo Dan didn't want to go down the mountain with Li Changsheng, but she also didn't want to stay in the sad place of Snow God's palace. She wanted to travel around and try her luck. She might only be an outer sect disciple in Snow God's palace, but she was much stronger than ordinary people. With Luo Dan's current strength, she would be considered a heroine in the ancient Jianghu. As long as she didn't meet a real cultivator, she could go anywhere in the world. Since Luo Dan didn't want to go with him, Li Changsheng wouldn't force her. In the end, he tied the red string on Luo Dan's wrist. He said goodbye to her. After this battle, Snow God's palace would definitely not dare to make trouble for Luo Dan again. In addition, Li Changsheng had let Luo Dan recognize the red string as her master. As long as she didn't meet a finger-profound realm cultivator like the master of Mountain Viewing Tower, there were very few people who could hurt Luo Dan, so he left with peace of mind. After going down the snowy mountain, Li Changsheng didn't return to Fengyao City directly, nor to Qin City. Instead, he went directly to Mount Xianhuang. Mount Xianhuang was the place where the master of Mountain Viewing Tower established his sect. It was considered a strange mountain in the northern land. It was a place where wind and snow fell all year round, but there was never a snowflake on Mount Xianhuang. If Li Changsheng guessed correctly, there should be a spiritual vein of fire under Mount Xianhuang. Since ancient times, places with spirit veins would usually give birth to some extraordinary things, such as heavenly treasures with special attributes, or things with spiritual intelligence. Although the master of Mountain Viewing Tower had occupied the mountain for decades, and many cultivators had cultivated there before, the things that were nurtured there might not be aware of it. They only knew how to absorb the spiritual qi emitted by Mount Xianhuang to cultivate, but they didn't know that some of the things that were being nurtured were the real treasures of Mount Xianhuang. Mount Xianhuang wasn't close to Mount Xianhuang, so Li Changsheng wasn't in a hurry. The unique snowy scenery of the northern land was, in fact, compared to the spiritual qi of the secular world. It was no different from a paradise. It was especially so for cultivators like Li Changsheng, who were not afraid of the cold. As he walked among the mountains and plains, he wholeheartedly enjoyed the scenery. His state of mind became even more peaceful as he walked on the snowy mountain. Mount Xianhuang was a famous paradise in the north. Many cultivators used to cultivate here, but ever since the Mount Gazing Pavilion Lord came out of nowhere, he chased all the cultivators away and took over this place to establish his own sect. More than a dozen true disciples, guardian elders, and ordinary inner and outer sect disciples were no less powerful than the Snow God's palace, a sect that had been around for hundreds of years. The Mountain Gazing Tower Master was lustful by nature. Since the establishment of the sect, he had taken in more than 10 beautiful wives and concubines. Most of them were ordinary people. Of course, there were also a few with good cultivation potential. The most outstanding among them was a beautiful woman named Yao Fengshan. She was originally his second disciple, but because he took a liking to her, he didn't care about their master and disciple relationship and directly took her in as a concubine. In the ancient times, this was a violation of human relations and a demonic act that everyone had the right to punish. But in the modern era, although the cultivation world still maintained many ancient etiquette, very few people cared about this. Even the distinction between good and evil wasn't clear. Yao Fengshan was not only the Mountain Gazing Tower Master's concubine, but also had an extraordinary cultivation. She had great prestige on Mount Xianhuang. She played the role of empress in the Mountain Gazing Tower Master's harem. It could be said that her power on Mount Xianhuang was second only to the Mountain Gazing Tower Master. At this moment, she suddenly summoned all the disciples of Mount Xianhuang to the main hall for a discussion. Both the Mountain Gazing Tower Master's wives and the guardian disciples were confused. They thought to themselves, The mountain-gazing tower master has just left, and this harem master has already summoned them. Does she want them to stop the mountain-gazing tower master from marrying Yushi? Today, everyone had been discussing in private. Given Yushi's status, once she married the mountain-gazing tower master, Yao Fengchun would definitely lose to Yushi. She would probably go from being the second in command to the third in Mount Xianwang. They had already made up their minds. No matter what Yao Fengchun said, they wouldn't listen to her and stop the mountain-gazing tower master from marrying Yushi. Who didn't know the mountain-gazing tower master's personality? Offending him wouldn't end well. However, what they did not expect was that Yao Fengchun waited for everyone to arrive and announced a piece of news that shocked them to the core. They weren't trying to stop the mountain-viewing tower master from marrying the snow god's palace master. It was just that the mountain-viewing tower master, who was almost invincible in their hearts, had shattered less than an hour after he left Mount Xianwang. The mountain-gazing tower lord had stumbled into an ancient immortal's abode and obtained a great fortune. This soul lamp was an ancient secret art he found in the abode. Put a strand of soul into the lamp. As long as the lamp kept burning, it meant that the person was still alive. There were more than 600 disciples in the mountain-gazing tower, and more than 10 rows of soul lamps were placed in the soul hall. Whoever's soul lamp burned more vigorously meant that their blood vitality was stronger. Ordinary disciples weren't qualified to enter the soul hall. Only the mountain-gazing tower master and a few of his most trusted people were qualified to enter. It was said that the soul fires of true disciples were the size of a fist, while ordinary disciples were only the size of a thumb. The mountain-gazing tower master's soul fire was bigger than a basin. The second in command wasn't the first to follow the mountain-gazing tower master, but Yao Fengchun, the disciple of his concubine. This was why Yao Fengchun could sit firmly in the second place. When Yao Fengchun finished telling the news, everyone in the room became silent. The mountain-gazing tower master's death was no different from a sudden clap of thunder to everyone present. I heard that the Snow God Palace is facing destruction. That's why the palace lord came here to ask for help. I didn't think that even Master would die there. The mountain-gazing tower master's first disciple, a middle-aged man whose soul lamp was a third smaller than Yao Fengchun's in the soul hall, pretended to wipe his tears and stood up. Since Master has met with misfortune, Mount Xianwang can't be without a master for even a day. Junior sister is Master's true disciple and also Master's lover. I implore you to take over as Mount Xianwang's lord and preside over the situation. The relationship between Yao Fengchun and the mountain-gazing tower master was no secret in Mount Xianwang. Back then, the mountain-gazing tower master even held a grand wedding for Yao Fengchun. In the beginning, everyone felt a bit awkward talking about her dual identity, but after seeing that Yao Fengchun didn't mind at all, they gradually accepted it as normal. Now that news of the mountain-gazing tower master's death came, their first thought was to choose a new mountain lord, not to avenge him. Everyone felt that this was only natural. The true disciples and the subordinates of the mountain-gazing tower master had originally only wanted to use the mountain-gazing tower master's prestige to intimidate others. The mountain-gazing tower master didn't have any true feelings for his disciples, and the disciples were even more indifferent to their master. Friends of vile characters would gather if there were benefits, and part if there were none. This was the most appropriate description for Mount Xianwang. Chapter 582. With the mountain-gazing tower lord dead, there were only 3 people with a chance of inheriting the position. Second disciple and pillow companion Yao Fengchun, first disciple Yang Shaoqing, and then head enforcer Yang Shaoqing was the first to speak, which was equivalent to giving up the position of mountain lord and choosing to express goodwill to Yao Fengchun. Only head enforcer Hida was left. Thus, everyone present looked at the head enforcer, who was sitting there without much emotion even after hearing about the mountain-gazing tower lord's death. Finally, could have slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were somewhat cold. He was the first to follow the mountain-gazing tower lord, so when he heard about his death, his face was the most expressionless, but his heart was the most disturbed. But now that he saw that not only did no one want to avenge the mountain-gazing Tower Lord, but they were in a hurry to choose a new mountain lord, he was very displeased. But despite his displeasure, Mount Xianhuang must have a new master. He didn't naturally look down on the female Yao Fengchun, but apart from Yao Fengchun, his first disciple, Yang Shaoqing, who was more qualified than Yao Fengchun to inherit the position of mountain lord, had clearly stood in Yao Fengchun's camp. This left him with no other choice. He could either stand up and compete with Yao Fengchun for the position of mountain lord, or pinch his nose and admit defeat, allowing this wanton girl to take the position of sect master. Head Enforcer, what do you think? At this moment, Yao Fengchun spoke with a smile. She's a woman, yet she wants me to be mountain lord. I'm terrified. Although she said this, she clearly wanted Hida to state his position. Since everyone has elected you to be mountain lord, then you should do it. I, Hida, have no objections. With that, he coldly snorted, got up, and walked out of the hall. Although he said he had no objections, he was very displeased in his heart. Since Head Enforcer has said so, I can't refuse. I'll take over the position of mountain lord for the time being. Yao Fengchun's slightly narrowed eyes carried a hint of coldness. She watched the Head Enforcer walk out of the hall before the cold glint disappeared. That damned old man. How dare he give me such a hard time? Wait until I master the technique the mountain-gazing Tower Lord taught me. Then I'll take care of him slowly. Just as Yao Fengchun was thinking about how to pacify the people and consolidate her position as quickly as possible, a subordinate came in and reported that there was a young man at the foot of the mountain who said he wanted to go up the mountain for a visit. Yao Fengchun wasn't in the mood to entertain guests. She waved her hand and said, no. However, when the subordinate turned around to pass on her order, she suddenly remembered that the mountain viewing tower master had just died, and someone had come to visit. Could it be related to the person who killed the mountain viewing tower master? Thus, he immediately stopped his subordinate and changed his words. Let him come directly to the main hall. Yao Fengchun naturally did not dare to provoke an existence that could kill the mountain viewing tower master. If they were sent by that person, then she must treat them well. Otherwise, she would be beheaded before she could even warm her seat as the mountain chieftain. In the hearts of everyone in Mount Xianhuang, the mountain-gazing master was a godlike existence. Because of this, no one dared to think about avenging him, not even the most loyal protector. Cultivators pursued higher realms. Outside of their own lives, nothing else was particularly important. After witnessing Li Changxing's terror, even the centuries-old snow god's temple had knelt down, let alone Mount Xianhuang, which had only been established for a few decades. Li Changxing adhered to the principle of using peaceful means before resorting to force and did not directly charge up the mountain. He came to Mount Xianhuang to investigate and see if the spirit vein below the mountain had given birth to something precious. If it did, he would take it away. If not, he would leave immediately. The mountain viewing tower master had opposed Li Changxing for a woman, but the people of Mount Xianhuang had no enmity with Li Changxing. Thus, he killed the mountain viewing tower master. As long as the people of Mount Xianhuang did not seek revenge, he would not eliminate them by their roots. These were two separate matters. Li Changxing was very clear about his grudges. Li Changxing was led into the main hall by the gatekeeper. Everyone's gazes fell on him in unison. Choosing to visit Mount Xianhuang at such a sensitive time, Li Changxing's identity made people ponder deeply. What business does Sir have with my Mount Xianhuang? Yao Fengchun was the new lord of Mount Xianhuang in name, but after seeing Li Changxing, she did not put on airs as the lord of this place and asked very politely. I originally came to Snow God's Temple to see a friend, but after hearing that Mount Xianhuang is a famous paradise, I want to take a look at the scenery on this mountain. If I have disturbed everyone, please forgive me. One would not slap a smiling face, not to mention that Li Changxing had casually mentioned Snow God's Temple and pointed out his identity. As expected, after hearing that Li Changxing had come from Snow God's Temple, everyone's expression changed. Sure enough, he was related to the master who killed the mountain viewing tower master. This was an emissary sent by that master. I see. You are a guest. If Sir wants to visit our Mount Xianhuang, of course, there is no problem. I will notify everyone. Apart from a few special places on Mount Xianhuang, sir, you can visit as you wish. With that, he really did give the order and had one of his subordinates arrange a courtyard for Li Changsheng, saying that Li Changsheng could stay as long as he wanted. Li Changsheng was led out of the main hall by that subordinate. When he had completely disappeared from everyone's sight, everyone present let out a long sigh of relief. Senior brother, what do you think? Yao Fengchun looked at the middle-aged man next to her, Yang Xiaoqing. I can't tell what cultivation level this young man has. He's young, so he shouldn't be an expert. At most, he's in the Qi refinement realm. But since he came from Snow God's temple, he must be a subordinate of the person who killed Master. There are only two reasons why he came to visit us so openly. First, he wants to see the attitude of Mount Xianhuang. Junior sister, you did well in this. If we showed even the slightest intention to kill him, I'm afraid that Mount Xianhuang would immediately be destroyed. The person who can kill Master is probably an expert in the profound realm, or even the profound realm. Even if he came here from Snow God's temple, with the help of some treasures, it would only take 10 minutes for him to come here. The second reason is that he said he wants to tour the mountain. I'm afraid he wants to see what treasures Mount Xianhuang has. If Mount Xianhuang is tactful and offers it to him, he will spare Mount Xianhuang. If we don't, I'm afraid that the master behind him who killed Master will use force. After listening to Yang Xiaoqing's analysis, everyone present nodded, thinking that it made sense. Yao Fengchun also agreed. The house master does have a lot of treasures. Apart from the most powerful mountain observation mirror, there are 5 or 6 artifacts of high quality. It seems that it's good enough that we can keep 1 or 2 of them. Yao Fengchun felt a little bitter. There were 2 reasons why she dared to take control of Mount Xianhuang after learning of the master's death. First, it was because of the power she had under Mount Xianhuang. Second, it was because of the 6 magic treasures left behind by the master. But if the 6 artifacts were taken away, only 1 or 2 would be left. It would not be so easy to intimidate these people, especially the Great Guardian. Yao Fengchun looked in the direction where the person disappeared and thought hatefully. If this person didn't have a mysterious expert who could kill Master behind him, a Qi refinement realm cultivator dares to covet the treasures of Mount Xianhuang. If I don't stab her to death, I'm not worthy of my title of Little Demoness. Chapter 583. Li Changsheng was led to a courtyard by a disciple of Mount Xianhuang. The courtyard was elegantly decorated with a sense of seclusion. Although the disciple was curious as to why this unassuming young man was staying in this courtyard that had always been reserved for the most distinguished guests, he was only a disciple at the bottom of the mountain, so he naturally didn't dare to probe further. After entering the courtyard, Li Changsheng didn't stroll around the mountain like the disciple said. After the disciple left, he sat cross-legged on the sofa and released his divine intent. It enveloped the entire mountain in order to find the exact location of the spirit vein. However, just as he released his divine intent, an uninvited guest arrived. The new mountain lord of Mount Xianhuang, Yao Fengchun, personally came to visit. She didn't rashly barge in and politely knocked on the door first. She only entered after receiving Li Changsheng's permission. Yao Fengchun's looks were quite extraordinary. Otherwise, she wouldn't have caught the eyes of that old pervert. At this moment, she had clearly changed into a new set of clothes. Because there was a fire vein below Mount Xianhuang, even in the cold northern lands, the mountain was like spring all year round. Thus, the people on the mountain wore relatively thin clothes. Yao Fengchun was wearing very revealing clothes at this moment. Her smile was especially charming as she stood in front of Li Changsheng. Even Li Changsheng had to admit that her beauty was even better than those stars in the movies and TV dramas. After entering the courtyard, Yao Fengchun appeared very generous and appropriate. She first asked Li Changsheng if this courtyard was to his liking. Then, she took the initiative to introduce Li Changsheng to the fun things on Mount Xianhuang. She emphasized that the mountain-gazing tower was the tallest building on the mountain. Standing on top, one could see the mountain's scenery at a glance. They chatted for more than 10 minutes. Most of the time, it was Yao Fengshun talking while Li Changsheng listened. In the end, Yao Fengshun took the initiative to accompany Li Changsheng on a tour of Mount Xianwang. Li Changsheng did not refuse. Walking on a mountain would also make it easier to find the location of the fire element spirit vein. After leaving the small courtyard, they followed Yao Fengshun's instructions and strolled around the area one by one. Along the way, many disciples of Mount Xianwang hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed. Yao Fengshun was now the true master of Mount Xianwang. News of the master's death had already spread to the entire mountain. They were supposed to hold a funeral for the master, but because they were afraid of offending the master's enemies, they simply canceled it and acted as if the master had never existed. After taking Li Changsheng around Mount Xianwang, he finally climbed up to the highest point of the mountain observation tower. Looking from top to bottom, it was indeed a good place to enjoy the scenery. Along the way, Yao Fengshun was unable to obtain any useful information from Li Changsheng. She hinted to Li Changsheng several times that he could ask for anything, but Li Changsheng pretended not to notice. With a belly full of doubts, Yao Fengshun could only use the excuse of being busy with the sect's affairs to leave. She had a female disciple in charge of internal affairs accompany Li Changsheng on a tour of the mountain. Before leaving, she reminded the female disciple to treat Li Changsheng with the same care as her. Although the female disciple had 10,000 questions in her mind, she didn't dare to ask. She could only nod and think to herself, "This young man doesn't seem to have a higher cultivation than me. Could he be the new mountain lord's little lover? Or perhaps a secular relative? Otherwise, how could he receive such preferential treatment?" The girl named Duan stood respectfully behind Li Changsheng. Seeing that Li Changsheng had been standing at the mountain observation tower for almost half an hour, she muttered in her heart, "This is a strange person. Even if he's just looking at the scenery, he shouldn't need such a long time. Moreover, he seems to have his eyes closed the entire time." All right, we can go back now. Just as Duwan's thoughts were running wild, she raised her head and saw that the young guest was already standing beside her. Li Changsheng's sudden appearance frightened Duwan to the point that her heart thumped wildly. Just as she was about to say something, she saw that the other party had already started walking down the mountain path. She hurriedly followed behind him. Just as Li Changsheng walked down the mountain observation tower, another uninvited guest arrived at Mount Xianwang. A middle-aged man dressed in casual clothes, accompanied by a few beautiful concubines, appeared at the entrance of Mount Xianwang. When the disciple in charge of guarding the gate saw the other party, he immediately greeted politely, "Young Master Ren Daoyuan, Immortal Crane Sect's first true disciple." Now that the old sect master of Immortal Crane Sect was in closed-door cultivation all year round, he was undoubtedly the true leader of Immortal Crane Sect. He just lacked a status. "I am here to request an audience with the Mountain Observation Tower Lord." Ren Daoyuan was famous for being arrogant and despotic in the northern lands, but his current attitude was extremely polite, with no flaws to be found. It was not because he suddenly changed his personality, but because the Mountain Observation Tower Lord was the #1 person in the northern lands cultivation world. Immortal Crane Sect could not afford to offend him. Hearing that the other party wanted to see the Mountain Observation Tower Lord, the disciple's expression was somewhat interesting. The news of the Mountain Observation Tower Lord's death in Snow God Palace had not spread yet. Until now, only Snow God Palace and Mount Xianwang knew about it. What's wrong? At this moment, Ren Daoyuan noticed the abnormality and asked in confusion. That disciple did not dare to speak carelessly and immediately shook his head. "Nothing. The Tower Lord is not on the mountain. Lady Yao is in charge now." "Good. Then bring me to see Lady Yao." Ren Daoyuan thought of the Mountain Observation Tower Lord's second disciple, Yao Fengshun, and his eyes flashed with passion, but he concealed it very well. He and the Mountain Observation Tower Lord had a common hobby. That was lust. The Mountain Observation Tower Lord had more than 10 beautiful wives and concubines. Ren Daoyuan was not inferior to him. This time, he came to Mount Xianhuang to seek an audience with the Mountain Observation Tower Lord because he had a request. Immortal Crane Sect had opened a new Dao field in the surroundings and wanted to set up a formation to connect it with the main peak. This was a huge project. Not only was it tiring, it was also very easy to make mistakes. He came this time to borrow the Mountain Observation Mirror from the Mountain Observation Tower Lord. The Mountain Observation Mirror was used to monitor Earth veins. If he could use it, it would save a lot of trouble. Yao Fengshan was brought to the main hall by the disciples guarding the gate. She was currently frowning, thinking about Li Changxing's matter. When she heard that Ren Daoyuan had come a visit, her heart skipped a beat. When the Mountain Observation Tower Lord was alive, Immortal Crane Sect's Ren Daoyuan naturally had to look up to Yao Fengshan. But now that the Mountain Observation Tower Lord was killed, even though Yao Fengshan was at late Xiantian realm, she was clearly not enough in front of Ren Daoyuan. Moreover, Ren Daoyuan had a Vajra realm master behind him. First, there was the mysterious Li Changsheng, which already made Yao Fengshan tremble in fear. Now, there was Ren Daoyuan, who was like a tiger in front and a wolf behind. Yao Fengshan only felt a little pressure to the point that she couldn't breathe. Yao Fengshan had met Ren Daoyuan a few times and knew that he was not a kind person. Every time she met him, he was well-behaved because the Mountain Observation Tower Lord was present. Even if he had any evil thoughts, he would not dare to show them. But now that he knew that the Mountain Observation Tower Lord was dead, he would no longer have any misgivings. This is really bitter. Yao Fengshan took a deep breath. No matter how much she hated this head disciple of Immortal Crane Sect, she still squeezed out an incomparably sincere smile and took the initiative to welcome him. Chapter 584. On the summit, Li Changsheng walked down from the mountain gazing tower accompanied by Duwan. At the bend of the mountain path, they were blocked by several figures. A group of youths dressed in the unique attire of Mount Xianhuang looked at Li Changsheng with cold gazes. Li Changsheng stopped. Duwan respectfully bowed to the people in front of them. "Greetings, senior brother." "Greetings, great guardian." There were more than 20 people in front. The one at the front was a man dressed in the attire of a true disciple. He was playing with a dagger that flickered with cold light. The dagger spun under his fingers, dazzling the onlookers. It was the first disciple of Mount Xuanhuang's mountain gazing tower, Yang Shaoqing. The old man next to him had a gloomy expression. He was the great guardian who had followed the mountain gazing tower for most of his life. In addition, there was also a burly man dressed in the attire of a true disciple. At a glance, one could tell he was a martial artist who practiced martial arts. His bulging muscles exuded a valiant aura from inside out. This true disciple intentionally fell half a step behind Yang Shaoqing, and to distinguish between the two. They didn't say anything about Duwan's bow. Their gazes were fixed on Li Changsheng from beginning to end. Yang Shaoqing said to Hida, "Great guardian, this young man is undoubtedly an envoy sent by the person who killed my master. When we make our move, you must keep an eye on him. Don't let him send out any distress signals. As long as the plan is carried out perfectly, Mount Xianhuang will belong to the two of us." Hearing Yang Shaoqing's words, Great Elder Hida shook his head. "I'm not that interested in the power of this mountain. When the time comes, I only want that treasure. Mount Xianhuang will belong to you. Don't worry, I won't fight for power with you. You can make your move later. Although I can't deal with the powerhouse behind him, it won't be a problem to stop him from leaking information." Hida took a step forward and immediately shot several yellow talismans in all directions. In an instant, a small space was isolated. In response, Li Changsheng stood on a mountain path a dozen meters away from them. He couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the people who didn't conceal their killing intent. Although that Yao Fengshan had repeatedly probed him, she was obviously much more tactful than these people. Time ticked by, and Li Changsheng remained standing there like a pine, tree rooted in a rock. However, Duwan's expression was getting worse and worse. Their voices were not low, and they did not have the slightest intention of concealing their words, so she heard everything. "Great guardian, great senior brother, This Mr. Li is Madame Yao's esteemed guest. He, Yang Xiaoqing laughed. The person he wanted to kill was Yao Fengchuan's guest. Upon hearing the news of the mountain observing tower master's death, Yang Xiaoqing was the first to stand out and support Yao Fengchuan's ascension to the position of mountain master. As the mountain observing tower master's eldest disciple, he was more qualified than Yao Fengchuan to inherit the position of mountain master. Did he really not covet the throne of first place? Of course not. The reason he was willing to let Yao Fengchuan sit in that position so easily was because he and the Great Guardian had devised a perfect scheme in an extremely short period of time. Since even the mountain observing tower master had died at someone else's hands, if the other party came to eliminate the root of the problem, the new mountain master would undoubtedly be the one to die the most miserable death. The gun would hit the bird that poked its head out. This had always been the case since ancient times. Thus, they directly let Yao Fengchuan become the mountain master. If someone came to seek revenge and Yao Fengchuan died, it wouldn't be too late for the two of them to divide Mount Xianwang evenly. However, they didn't expect Li Changsheng to appear at this time and be mistaken for an emissary sent by the mysterious person who killed the mountain observing tower master. If Yao Fengchuan could avoid this crisis by offering up a few transcendent artifacts, then they would really go for wool and come home shorn. Thus, they added another layer to their original plan, shifting the blame. As long as this young man died in Mount Xianwang and they found a secluded place to hide, Yao Fengchuan would have no way to explain herself. Once that expert came to condemn her, Yao Fengchuan would undoubtedly die. Once Yao Fengchuan was dead and that person's anger was appeased, the two of them would return to reorganize Mount Xianwang. Although it was very likely that the transcendent artifacts left behind by the mountain observing tower master will be taken away by the other party, Yao Fengchuan didn't know about the true treasures of Mount Xianwang, and that expert who killed the mountain observing tower master would know either. When the time came, the two of them would divide the treasures. The prerequisite was that they had to kill this young man today. Kid, you're blocking my way. Yang Xiaoqing began to walk forward. The head enforcer on his left, the third junior brother on his right, and the 20 or so disciples behind him also moved forward. Li Changsheng stood to the side and gave way to the path up the mountain. Yang Xiaoqing couldn't help but be taken aback, then burst into laughter. Does this kid really think that we won't cause trouble for him if he gives way? The head enforcer's eyes were also filled with ridicule. Du Wan, whose face was filled with anxiety and fear, was somewhat speechless. She whispered, Mr. Li, they aren't really going up the mountain. They've come specifically to deal with you. Even if you step aside, they won't let you go. Even I might be implicated by you and die here with you. But what Du Ju didn't expect was that after hearing her words, Li Changxing's face didn't reveal any trace of fear. Instead, he grinned. Of course I know it's not because I'm blocking their way. I'm only doing this so that I can feel a bit more at ease when I kill them. Du-Wan understood the meaning behind Li Changxing's words, but she was still somewhat incredulous. Could it be that this unassuming youth thinks he can defeat the 20 or so powerful senior brothers of Mount Xianhuang who came prepared, especially the head enforcer and eldest senior brother? Both of them are formidable Xiantian cultivators. While Du-Wan's mind was in a mess, Yang Xiaoqing and the others stopped once more. Head enforcer, I'm going to make my move. Are you sure the formation you laid down can prevent him from calling for help? Don't worry, could have chuckled. If this were any other place, perhaps I would need to check it again. But in our Mount Xianhuang, I guarantee that nothing will go wrong. That's good. Yang Xiaoqing looked at his third junior brother, who was half a step behind him. Junior brother Ning, kill this youth, and I'll give you the greatest merit. When I regain control of Mount Xianhuang, you'll be the vice sect master. All right. Junior brother Ning strode forward. Eldest senior brother, just watch. I'll wring his head off in 3 moves at most. But eldest senior brother has to promise me one thing. I don't have any great hobbies other than collecting skulls. I want to make this guy's head into a wine cup, but when the master behind the scenes comes to question me, it won't be easy to fool him without his head. I'll need eldest senior brother to deal with the aftermath. Don't worry, I'll fulfill your wish. At worst, I'll just burn to ashes. This is called destroying the corpse and erasing all traces." Yang Xiaoqing laughed. In their eyes, Li Changsheng was no different from a dead man. Chapter 585. With senior brother's words, I can make my move without worry. Third junior brother Han Ling approached Li Changxing step by step with a cruel smile in his eyes. "Kid, I'm very curious. Who is the master behind you? The person who killed our master. Why don't you tell us? Maybe the master behind you is too powerful, and we'll let you go in fear?" Han Ling's eyes were filled with mockery. Saying this at this time was no different from a cat toying with a mouse. "Master behind me?" Li Changsheng was stunned. "I see. What if I say I don't have a master behind me, and I'm the one who killed the mountain-gazing tower master?" Upon hearing Li Changsheng's words, not only Han Ling, but even Yang Xiaoqing and the others behind him burst into laughter. "You? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? This is the funniest joke I've ever heard." Han Ling stopped not far away from Li Changsheng. "Are you really not going to tell me about your master behind you? If you tell me now, you can live a little longer. Otherwise, when I punch you later, you'll have to say goodbye to this world. I told you the truth, but you didn't believe me. Instead, you spout so much nonsense. How can you be so sure that I'm the one who died between us and not you?" Li Changxing's eyes were filled with mockery. "Of course I'm sure. It doesn't make sense that I, an innate realm expert, would lose to you. Besides, can't you see that I'm a pure martial artist? Unless you're a Vajra realm expert, even if you're at the peak of the innate realm, you won't be able to bear the consequences of letting a pure martial artist like me get within 3 steps of you." As soon as Han Ling finished speaking, crackling sounds came from all over his body. His already tall figure seemed to have grown a lot taller in an instant, and a majestic aura spread out from his body. Third junior brother, who has always been reckless, actually knows how to hide his strength. I'm afraid there are only a handful of people in Mount Xianhuang who can be his opponent. Even if I'm within 3 steps of him, I'm afraid I won't have an easy time." Yang Xiaoqing lamented. "Who doesn't have a secret in Mount Xianhuang? Great guardian," he just said casually. Yang Xiaoqing obediently shut his mouth. Indeed, third junior brother Han Ling had secrets, but so did he. If he were to fight against his third junior brother, even if his third junior brother had reached the peak of Thor training, he would still be defeated by him. However, in the face of Han Ling's powerful aura, Li Changsheng only took half a step forward. When the powerful aura descended in front of him, it naturally slid away like a boulder in a flowing river or a tree in a storm. Looks like this kid has some ability. The chief enforcer, Kuda, who had been silent all this time, revealed a look of bewilderment. Since he's the messenger of the expert, I would be disappointed if he doesn't have any skills. However, it doesn't matter if he has any skills or not. He's not going to survive today. Yang Xiaoqing chuckled. Grand Protector, he didn't comment on Xiaoqing's confidence. Forget about the 20 or so disciples behind them. Just the Grand Protector himself was confident enough to deal with everything. He was just a young man who might not even be in the innate stage. What could he do? Say, this guy's expression doesn't change even now. Do you think he has some powerful Dharma treasure on him? He's planning to give us a fatal blow. Yang Xiaoqing looked at Hida. Isn't that even better? We'll get another Dharma treasure. Hida smiled coldly. At that moment, Han Ling's aura reached its peak. Kid, you're quite capable to be able to hold on for so long under my aura. However, Li Changxing only smiled disdainfully at Han Ling's compliment. You'll soon find out that I'm not just a little capable. I'm very capable. Is that so? Han Ling clenched his fists. Whether you're capable or not depends on whether my fists admit it. The blue stone beneath third senior brother Han Ling's feet suddenly shattered, and a basin-sized crater appeared. He charged at Li Changsheng like an angry bull. In the face of that huge fist, Li Changsheng moved his feet lightly and dodged the attack by a millimeter. He didn't expect Li Changsheng to be able to dodge. Han Ling's other fist followed up and smashed at Li Changsheng's lower abdomen. However, the fist only hit an afterimage. Li Chongqing's footsteps were as light as water, and he floated back, widening the distance between him and Han Ling. Good boy, your movement technique is not bad. Let's see how many moves you can dodge. Han Ling's eyes revealed a mocking look. Since Li Chongqing didn't dare to take two of his punches, he had already determined that the other party was only good at Qinggong. The trace of caution he had left was completely dispelled. Then he punched again. The distance between him and Li Chongqing, who was only a few steps away, was instantly shortened. The power of his fists wreaked havoc like a sudden clap of thunder. It was unknown how many times more majestic than the previous two punches. This punch was like the thunder god's hammer. Under the fist force, a gust of wind rose from the ground. The fist force enveloped Li Chongqing, and he was determined not to give him any chance to dodge. He wanted to kill him with one punch. Originally, such a punch would be fatal if it landed on the head. However, Han Ling was aiming at Li Chongqing's chest. He had already set his sights on Li Chongqing's head and treated it as a work of art. He was afraid that it would be destroyed. However, this time, Li Chongqing didn't dodge again. Instead, he suddenly raised his arm and met the attack. The iron chain across the river created an unshakable force out of nowhere. Han Ling suddenly felt a sense of danger. However, out of confidence in his fist technique, he didn't pull back his fist. Instead, he sped up. Boom! Just as Han Ling's fist was about to hit Li Chongqing's arm, Li Chongqing's aura burst out like a flood. He raised his arm and hit Han Ling's fist. Bang! Han Ling felt as if he had hit a towering mountain. He felt a huge force, and his whole body was sent flying back a few steps. He stared at Li Chongqing with a hint of shock in his eyes. Good boy, you really have hidden your strength. I didn't expect you to be a martial artist. However, if you don't take out your natal magic weapon or something, I won't hold back anymore. Just now, when Li Chongqing suddenly burst out his aura, it wasn't Li Chongqing who sent Han Ling flying. Instead, it was Han Ling who took the initiative to borrow the strength of Li Chongqing's arm to fly back the moment his fist came into contact with Li Chongqing's arm. It turned out that he had been wary of Li Chongqing's protective magic weapon. The seemingly powerful punch was just a test. This burly guy was really scheming. A martial artist, especially one who proves one's Tao through strength, should be courageous and fearless. However, when you use your fist, you are afraid. I'm afraid your future achievements will stop here. Li Chongqing shook his head. The look of disappointment was like that of a master looking at an unworthy disciple. This feeling made Han Ling very angry. What the hell? How dare you criticize my martial arts? Let's see if you still dare to say that my martial arts are bad when I kill you with one punch. Chapter 586. Han Ling was furious, not because Li Chongqing looked down on him, but because he had failed to find out Li Chongqing's strength after throwing 3 punches in a row. This made him feel a little embarrassed, as he had wanted to show off in front of his eldest senior brother, Yang Shaoqing. Once Yang Shaoqing and He Da's plan was carried out perfectly, they would soon become the true masters of Mount Xianwang. The stronger he was, the more he would be valued by Yang Shaoqing, and the more things he would be able to get. This time, Han Ling's aura was clearly different. Compared to the majestic aura just now, not only did he restrain his aura, but even the domineering fist intent seemed to have disappeared. Yang Shaoqing and He Da nodded slightly behind him. Third junior brother is really going all out this time. I'm very curious if the full power of his physique cultivator technique is comparable to that of a peak Khanate realm cultivator. The lethality of a physique cultivator is many times higher than that of an ordinary cultivator. It shouldn't be difficult for him to stand shoulder to shoulder with a peak Khanate realm cultivator. He just said casually. When Han Ling slowly raised his fist, Li Chongqing was the first to attack. Whoosh! The strong wind brought about by the fist rubbed against the air, but it was much weaker than Han Ling's previous punch. Li Chongqing stepped on the ground and threw a punch at Han Ling. Han Ling's eyes were cold. Does this kid think that he's underestimating me because I've restrained my fist aura? How dare he take the initiative to attack? He's simply courting death. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, his fist finally finished accumulating power and was about to burst out. However, Li Changsheng was already within 3 steps of him at this moment. Within 3 steps, he could defeat an entire nation. This was a saying used to describe a physique refinement grandmaster. However, in Han Ling's eyes, since Li Changsheng's weak physique was not a physique cultivator, he was undoubtedly tired of living if he dared to come within 3 steps of him and compete with his fist. Therefore, he was looking forward to Li Changsheng's approach. Die, brat! Han Ling threw a punch at Li Changsheng's fist. Bang! With a loud boom, a cruel look appeared in Han Ling's eyes. In his mind, he imagined the scene of the skinny young man's arm exploding from his punch. However, his expression quickly changed to one of shock, because it was his fist that had been destroyed. Li Changsheng's fist, which did not seem to have much destructive power, exploded with a terrifying force the moment it collided with his fist. Then his entire fist directly exploded, and even half of his arm became twisted, revealing the white stubble of his bones. Bang, 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 bang. A series of explosions sounded like the sound of ignited firecrackers exploding. The remaining half of Han Ling's arm continued to explode, turning into clouds of blood mist in an extremely short period of time. His entire arm was gone. Third junior brother seems to have lost. Yang Shaoqing stared at the arena, his eyes filled with disbelief. Beside him, Kuda, the great guardian, had already dashed towards Li Changsheng. The older, the wiser. While Yang Shaoqing was still in shock, Kuda had already made his move. However, when Kuda was halfway there, Li Changsheng had already thrown his second punch. This time, it landed accurately on Han Ling's chest. Bang! The crisp sound was accompanied by Han Ling's miserable cry. When Kuda rushed over, Han Ling was also sent flying by Li Changsheng's punch. When he landed, Han Ling's entire chest was caved in. Every time he breathed, he spat out blood. It seemed that he would not survive. Yang Shaoqing's eyelids twitched wildly. With Han Ling's strength, even if he were to attack, he would have to use all his trump cards to suppress him. It was impossible for him to injure Han Ling so easily with his consummate skills. Kuda had already rushed forward, his fingers curled into claws as he grabbed towards Li Changsheng's head. However, he did not succeed. Li Changsheng gently tilted his head and dodged the attack. Kuda was very experienced in combat. Since he failed to grab Li Changsheng's forehead, his hand grabbed towards Li Changsheng's shoulder. However, the moment he grabbed Li Changsheng's shoulder, his face did not reveal joy, but shock. He felt as if he had grabbed onto a steel plate. No matter how hard he tried, he could not cause any harm to Li Changsheng. How is this possible? In an instant, Kuda was greatly alarmed. He kicked Li Changsheng's chest, wanting to use the force to retreat. However, in the next moment, Li Changsheng grabbed his ankle and pulled hard, smashing him to the ground. Originally, with Kuda's strength, it wasn't as if he didn't have a chance to counterattack in this situation. Unfortunately, when he circulated his true chi, he was shocked to find that half of the meridians in his body were blocked. He could only watch as his head crashed into the hard bluestone on the ground. Save me, could have finally panicked. Great Guardian, I'll save you. Yang Shaoqing could tell that Li Changsheng was not easy to deal with. The fact that the Great Guardian, who had always been arrogant, could ask for help spoke volumes. Therefore, he did not hesitate to join the battle. However, he did not know the condition of the Great Guardian's body. Therefore, he did not choose to save Kuda directly. Instead, he circled around and attacked Li Changsheng from behind. In his opinion, even if the Great Guardian was not Li Changsheng's match, the Great Guardian should be able to last more than 10 moves. If he attacked Li Changsheng to save Li Changsheng would have no choice but to turn around and face him. When the Great Guardian regained his freedom, he could form a pincer attack. However, just as he circled to the side, Kuda was smashed to the ground by Li Changsheng. Bang! Kuda's head and the bluestone collided violently. In just one hit, Kuda's head was smashed into pieces. Although Kuda was an expert at the peak of the Khanate realm, and was half a step away from the Vajra realm, he cultivated Tao techniques. His body was not as strong as Han Ling, who was a physique refinement grandmaster. Yang Shaoqing, who was about to launch a sneak attack on Li Changsheng, was stunned. The great guardian had died, just like that. In the distance, Han Ling, who was still coughing blood, let out a heavy sigh. Only after exchanging blows with Li Changsheng would he understand how terrifying his opponent's strength was. Yang Shaoqing's strategy of attacking Li Changsheng to save Li Changsheng was ridiculously wrong. However, Han Ling did not remind him because he knew that even if Yang Shaoqing chose to save the Great Guardian directly, it would be useless. Li Changsheng had not revealed his true strength. Even if the three of them joined forces, they would not be able to change the outcome. Once Kuda died, the array formation he had set up would naturally be broken. Although Yang Shaoqing still had more than 20 subordinates behind him, they did not dare to fight with Li Changsheng. They turned and ran down the mountain, choosing to escape. You are indeed the eldest disciple of the mountain-gazing tower master. You have the same moral character as your master. Li Changsheng snorted coldly. He suddenly stretched out his palm, which turned into a huge handprint. It descended from the sky and grabbed Yang Shaoqing's neck, pulling him back as if he was grabbing a chicken. If Yang Shaoqing had been fearful when he saw Li Changsheng kill Kuda, he was now in complete despair. Perhaps even his master could not achieve such a level of magical power. He lifted his head and looked at Li Changsheng with fear. He stammered, "You are not a messenger. You are the person who killed my master." Chapter 587. In the guest hall of Mount Xianwang, Yao Fengchun carefully entertained the first disciple of Immortal Crane sect, Ren Daoyuan. The Xiantian realm Ren Daoyuan was indeed a famous lecher in the northern cultivation world. Whenever he went out, he would bring a group of girls with him. Sitting there were 3 harem-like existences, each with their own merits, and there were also 6 extraordinary maids. You're saying that Mountain Observing Tower Lord died in Snow God Temple. When Ren Daoyuan heard this news, he broke out in cold sweat from shock. The Mountain Gazing Tower Master was already a person who stood at the top of the mountain in the world of cultivators in the northern reaches. Now, he had died without even knowing who killed him. This was earth-shattering news. It was believed that in a few days, the entire world of cultivators in the northern reaches would be shaken. With Mountain Observing Tower Lord dead, he could not borrow Mountain Observing Mirror anymore. But Ren Daoyuan did not intend to leave just like that. With Mountain Observing Tower Lord dead, Yao Fengchun was clearly the new owner of Mount Xianwang. Mount Xianwang, especially the cultivation methods and treasures left behind by Mountain Observing Tower Lord, was coveted by everyone in the northern lands. In the past, Ren Daoyuan did not dare to have any improper thoughts about Yao Fengchun because of Mountain Observing Tower Lord. Now that Mountain Observing Tower Lord was gone, as long as he, the first disciple of Immortal Crane sect, married Yao Fengchun, wouldn't the foundation of Mount Xianhuang be his? Therefore, the way Ren Daoyuan looked at Yao Fengchun changed. "Young Master Ren, I'm really sorry. I can't help you with Mountain Observing Mirror." Yao Fengchun purposely ignored Ren Daoyuan's gaze. Although she was unhappy with Ren Daoyuan's gaze, she still smiled brightly. "Don't worry, I'm also very sad about Mountain Observing Tower Lord's death. I wonder how Lady Yao plans to arrange his funeral? I have nothing to do these few days. I can stay and help." Yao Fengchun subconsciously wanted to reject him, but seeing Ren Daoyuan smile, her heart thumped. She knew that if she rejected him directly, she would anger this first disciple of Immortal Crane sect. She could only go against her will and say, "Since young Master Ren is willing to help, that's great." Yao Fengchun's mind spun quickly. She could not think of a way to reject Ren Daoyuan, so she could only feign civility. At this moment, a disciple hurriedly walked in. That disciple glanced at Ren Daoyuan, wanting to say something, but hesitated. "Young Master Ren, excuse me for a moment." Yao Fengchun knew that her subordinate must have something that was inconvenient to say in front of Ren Daoyuan, so she excused herself and walked out of the room. "What's going on?" You're so flustered. This disciple was Yao Fengchuan's confidant, so he must have something important to say. Although he seemed to be blaming him, he didn't have any intention of reprimanding him. Madam, the great guardian and eldest senior brother are leading more than 20 disciples towards the top of the mountain. It seems that something is going on. Has the esteemed guest returned yet? Yao Fengchun was a very intelligent woman. She immediately thought of something. After you left, that guest stayed up there and didn't come back. Oh no, I was wondering why Yang Shaoqing would so decisively support me as the mountain chieftain, and why the great protector didn't stand out to oppose it. So it turns out that he was waiting for me here. With that, she instructed the disciple. Immediately summoned the few senior and junior brothers close to me, as well as the great protectors and hall masters. Have them gather with me at the top of the mountain. Yes, that disciple hurriedly accepted the order and left. Yao Fengchun took a deep breath, suppressed the worry in her heart, and walked back to the guest hall. At this moment, Run Daoyuan was leaning against a chair with his eyes narrowed. A servant girl was massaging his shoulders. Young Master Run, my sect has some small matters to take care of. Please rest in the guest room in a moment. I'll host a banquet for you tonight. Madam Yao, you're not deliberately avoiding me, are you? Mount Xianwang is currently without a leader. As a woman, it's really too hard on you. I just want to help you share some of the burden. Then I thank young Master Ren for his kind intentions. Yao Fengchun forced a smile. At this moment, she was burning with anxiety and couldn't care less about Ren Daoyuan. After instructing a subordinate to bring Ren Daoyuan to the guest room, she hurriedly walked out and arrived at another discussion hall. At this moment, more than 30 people had already gathered. They were all Yao Fengchuan's direct subordinates. The head enforcer and eldest senior brother are working together to trap me. They're going to block that Mr. Li. Once Mr. Li dies in their hands, they'll take the opportunity to hide. Then, I won't be able to clear my name even if I jump into the Yellow River. So, we need to hurry to the peak immediately. I can only hope that Mr. Li isn't dead. Otherwise, we can only abandon this huge foundation of Mount Xianwang. Aren't the head enforcer and eldest senior brother too treacherous? A young man said indignantly. I was careless. Let's set off now. After Yao Fengchun finished speaking, the group rushed up the mountain in a grandiose manner. On the peak, Yang Shaoqing looked at the man in front of him with a face full of fear. He couldn't understand how someone so young could have such terrifying strength. Tell me, what was the treasure that you and that old man said you wanted to split? Li Changsheng had overheard the conversation between the two. That head enforcer didn't want the authority of Mount Xianwang, but a treasure. He guessed that it was very likely to be something nurtured by the fire element spirit vein. If I tell you, can you not kill me? Yang Shaoqing stammered. I can't. Li Changsheng shook his head. I can only let you die a quick death. Then why should I tell you? Yang Shaoqing's face suddenly became ferocious. Only head enforcer and I know those secrets. If you kill me, you'll never know about that treasure. Is that so? Li Changsheng smiled faintly. You're too naive. I have 100 ways to find out what those treasures are, so you can go die now. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Changsheng suddenly reached out and grabbed Yang Shaoqing's head, then pulled up. Suddenly, a transparent figure was pulled out by him. It was Yang Shaoqing's soul. Then his palms suddenly shrank, and the divine soul was kneaded into a ball. Images continuously appeared in the ball. It was the soul-searching technique. All of Yang Shaoqing's memories were inside. After a few minutes, Li Changsheng browsed through all of Yang Shaoqing's memories and finally found the secret he and head enforcer were talking about. It really is something nurtured by the fire element spirit vein, but I didn't expect it to be a fire dragon. Li Changsheng muttered to himself. Then, he casually stuffed the crumpled soul into his mouth. Yang Shaoqing, whose soul had been extracted, was already lying on the ground, lifeless. The disciples of Mount Xianhuang who witnessed all this from afar felt a chill run down their spines. Mei Duan, who was standing not far from Li Changsheng, was so scared that her legs were trembling. Chapter 588. Surly, are you all right? Yao Fengchun was burning with anxiety at the sight of the crowd in front of her. She immediately rushed over. Head enforcer, Yang Xiaoqing, you actually framed me. Yao Fengchun passed through the crowd, her furious rebuke coming to an abrupt halt. This was because the great guardian and eldest senior brother were nowhere to be seen. Surly, Yao Fengchun only noticed the strange atmosphere when she rushed out of the crowd, especially when she saw her third junior brother, Han Ling, lying there and vomiting blood. The confusion in her eyes deepened. Madam, Duan hastily bowed upon seeing Yao Fengchun. This is when Yao Fengchun saw the corpses of Yang Xiaoqing and head enforcer on the ground. A thought occurred to her that made her jump in fright. Could this be Sir Li's doing? She didn't even need to ask Li Changsheng for confirmation. Duan had already spilled the beans and recounted the entire sequence of events. At the same time, she turned to Li Changsheng with fear in her eyes. Yao Fengchun took a deep breath, suppressed her fear, and bowed to Li Changsheng. This little girl had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I didn't know that Sir had come to Mount Xianwang. If Sir has taken a fancy to Mount Xuanwang's foundation, feel free to take it. I killed the mountain gazing tower lord. Don't you want to avenge him? Li Changsheng was rather curious. It would have been fine if it had been someone else, but Yao Fengchun was not only the mountain gazing tower lord's disciple, but also his wife. After learning of his true identity, there was only respect and fear, not a trace of hatred. Since Sir can kill the tower lord, wouldn't I be courting death if I sought revenge? Besides, I was forced to marry the mountain-gazing tower lord. I don't have much affection for him. In his eyes, I'm just a servant girl who warms his bed. I understand. Li Changxing nodded. The mountain-gazing tower lord married her because he coveted her beauty, while she married him because she had no other choice. Plus, she wanted to use the mountain-gazing tower lord's relationship to consolidate her position in Mount Xianhuang. I didn't come to Mount Xianhuang for your property, but to take away the item nurtured by the earth vein beneath the mountain. Logically speaking, it should belong to Mount Xianhuang, but the master of the mountain-gazing tower snatched it from someone else. Do you have any objections if I take it away? Yao Fengchun hurriedly shook her head. Now that the house lord is dead and I am in charge of Mount Xianhuang, there are countless eyes on me. Not to mention that the treasure is a natural creation. Even if it is something that belongs to Mount Xianhuang, as long as you need it, you can take it. Li Changxing nodded. A wise man submits to circumstances. A woman like you is quite open-minded. It's just that the thing nurtured by Mount Xianhuang hasn't completely succeeded. I'm afraid I'll have to come again next time. May I be so bold as to invite Mister to attend my banquet at Mount Xianhuang tonight? It's to celebrate this little girl taking charge of Mount Xianhuang, and also to entertain a distinguished guest like Mr. Li. Good. I still need you to look after the thing nurtured by Mount Xianhuang. When it's completely nurtured, I promise that Mount Xianhuang will be worry-free for 10 years. As Li Changsheng finished speaking, Yao Fengchun bowed towards Li Changsheng again, showing excitement on her face. Thank you, Mr. Li. Yao Fengchun had just taken charge of Mount Xianhuang. Even though the protector and Yang Xiaoqing died at Li Changsheng's hands, and the internal situation was stabilized, Mount Xianhuang was a blessed land. Without a powerful expert like the mountain-gazing tower lord, there were countless people who wanted to get their hands on it. People like the head disciple of a mortal crane sect would probably increase in number in the future. But with the protection of an expert like Li Changsheng, the situation would be completely different. All right, I'll return to the courtyard first. Call me when the banquet starts. Li Changsheng walked down the mountain peak, leaving the venue to Yao Fengchun. There were more than 20 disciples who rebelled with Yang Xiaoqing. Yao Fengchun naturally had to deal with them. But Li Changsheng was here, so Yao Fengchun could not show off. Li Changsheng returned to the small courtyard and released his divine sense, passing through layers of obstructions and entering the depths of the ground. He saw a crimson-red spirit vein flowing slowly. In the river, a red carp was swimming continuously. This was the divine being nurtured by this spirit vein. It was in the form of a carp now, but when it was completely nurtured, it would gradually turn into a flood dragon. Once it was born, it would be equivalent to a finger-profound realm expert. No wonder the protector coveted it. If he could obtain the help of such a flood dragon, he could do whatever he wanted in the entire northern lands. And Yang Shaoqing coveted the power of Mount Xianhuang. Even though a portion of the spirit vein's essence was absorbed by the flood dragon, it was still a cultivation treasure land. After a long time, Li Changsheng withdrew his divine sense. For this flood dragon to truly take human form, it would take at least 3 months, and at most half a year. "Sir, my madam invites you to a banquet." Li Changsheng's mind was immersed in his observation. Unknowingly, close to 2 hours had passed. When he withdrew, he heard a knock on the door. It was the servant Du Wan that Yao Fengchun asked to serve him. Du Wan looked at Li Changsheng with reverence and fear. Back then, the scene of Li Changsheng killing the protector and Yang Shaoqing scared her to death. Even though Li Changsheng had a smile on his face, in her eyes, it made her hair stand on end. "All right." Li Changsheng stretched lazily, stood up, and walked out of the courtyard with Du Wan, walking towards the banquet hall. At the same time, Immortal Crane Sect's eldest disciple, Ren Daiyuan, also walked out of the guest room, bringing his 3 concubines and a group of servants to the banquet hall. The two coincidentally met on the small path in front of the hall. The other party was a group of orioles and swallows. Even Li Changsheng could not help but take a few more glances. Where did this country bumpkin come from? What are you looking at? If you keep looking, I'll dig your eyes out. One of Ren Daiyuan's concubines just happened to turn her head, her gaze colliding with Li Changsheng. When she saw that it was an ordinary-looking youth, she could not help but snort coldly. Once the girl spoke, Ren Daiyuan's group immediately stopped, sizing up Li Changsheng with a few gazes. Ren Daiyuan frowned, snorting, "Brat, keep your dog eyes in check. This is your first offense. I won't bicker with you. Next time, if you keep glancing around, then my green shadow's words are not just to scare you. I'll really dig your eyes out." Saying so, Ren Daiyuan turned around and continued walking. Du Wan originally wanted to defend herself, but was stopped by Li Changsheng. "It's fine. Who doesn't hear a few barks when they go out?" Du Wan's face was dazed. Then she giggled. Suddenly, she felt that if this Mr. Li was not so scary when he attacked, he would really be an interesting person. Chapter 589. Look at that bumpkin's unconvinced expression. If not for the fear of ruining husband's plans, I would have slapped them. The concubine named Green Shadow said fiercely as she walked around. Ren Daiyuan stretched out his hand and touched her fat buttocks. Why get angry with a small character? That guy doesn't look like a disciple of Xianhuang Mountain. And there's even a servant girl beside him. He should be a guest invited by Xianhuang Mountain. His identity is unclear for now. Otherwise, I would have slapped them without needing you to say anything. Hearing Ren Daiyuan's words, the girl called Lu Ying felt much better, saying coldly, "So what if he's a guest of Xianhuang Mountain? Could it be that he can be compared to you, husband? A brat who's still wet behind his ears. He might be a relative of one of Xianhuang Mountain's guardian disciples. Even the new master of Xianhuang Mountain has to be obedient in front of Yao Fengchun husband. Who does he think he is?" "Madam, you're just being unreasonable. That's not good." Ren Daiyuan chuckled. Although he said it was not good, looking at his expression, he clearly did not mind at all. This was just a small interlude. As the saying goes, the husband sings and the wife follows. Lu Ying's spoiled temper was learned from her husband. Ren Daiyuan was famous for being unreasonable. They walked into the hall together. After Yao Fengchun saw Ren Daiyuan, she hurriedly went up to him. Even though she had Li Changsheng's promise, who knew if this terrifyingly powerful Sir Li would forget about it after a casual sentence. Thus, Yao Fengchun did not dare to treat Immortal Crane Sect's first disciple, Ren Daiyuan, lightly. Ren Daiyuan did not put on any airs in front of Yao Fengchun. Even though Xianhuang Mountain's status had plummeted after losing Mountain Viewing Tower's lord, if he forced Yao Fengchun into a corner and found a force not inferior to Immortal Crane Sect to join, he would have wasted all his efforts. She invited Yuan and the rest in and sat down at the guest seats. But Yuan's expression immediately turned grim because there was an empty seat in front of him. Could it be that apart from me, there are guests with even more distinguished statuses on Mount Xianhuang? Although Yuan was a little unhappy in his heart, since Yao Fengshan thought that there was someone more honorable than him, he was not a fool. At this time, if he did not let it go and offended that more honorable guest, then he would make enemies for himself for no reason. However, his heart was also filled with doubts. In the northern lands, the only person with a higher status than him was probably the head of the sect. Could it be that someone is so well-informed that they already know about the death of the mountain viewing tower master and dare to plot against him? While Yuan was thinking, the green shadow pointed in the direction of the door. That brat who couldn't control his eyeballs just now also came in. Where do you think he will sit? After Green Shadow finished speaking, a woman next to her curled her lips in disdain. Being able to bring a maid with him means that his status isn't too low. He shouldn't be sitting near the entrance, but he's so young and his cultivation seems to be average. At most, he should be sitting in the middle with the inner disciples of Mount Xianhuang. I agree with your judgment, the other woman echoed. That's really disappointing. If he could sit a little closer, I could teach him a lesson so that he doesn't know what's important. Green Shadow said regretfully. Sister Green Shadow, don't tell me you've taken a liking to this youth. I heard that before Sister Green Shadow got married, you were a famous romantic in the northern lands. Green Shadow's expression immediately became unsightly. Xian Tao, what nonsense are you talking about? If it weren't for my husband, I would have torn your mouth apart. What? Did I hit a sore spot? The woman named Xian Tao did not back down. Yuan, who was originally thinking about something, couldn't help but frown. Both of you, calm down. Don't embarrass me when we're outside. Yes, husband. The two women lowered their heads at the same time. Although Yuan was very protective of the fairer sex, he also had a very cold side. At this time, seeing Li Changsheng come in, Yao Fengshan hastily went to greet him. Sir Li, I originally wanted to personally invite you to the courtyard, but there are many matters to attend to at this banquet, so I could only have Du Wan do it in my place. Compared to when she received Yuan, Yao Fengshan was clearly more sincere when she received Li Changsheng. Although Li Changsheng had killed the mountain-gazing tower lord, it had allowed Yao Fengshan to become Mount Xuanhuang's lord and no longer be suppressed. Meanwhile, Li Changsheng only cared about the treasure nurtured by the fire spirit vein. Yao Fengshan didn't feel any heartache over losing something that didn't belong to her. Moreover, she could trade it for Li Changsheng's protection of Mount Xianhuang. But Yuan was different. Yuan coveted her and the foundation of Mount Xianhuang. If Yuan succeeded, Yao Fengshan would return to the state she was in when the mountain-gazing edifice lord was still alive, perhaps even worse. Thus, if Yao Fengshan had to make a choice between Li Changsheng and Yuan, Yao Fengshan would be able to accept Li Changsheng taking the treasure, or even becoming Li Changsheng's subordinate. However, Yuan was different. Just who is this brat? Yuan's expression shifted several times at this scene. Don't tell me he's the person Yao Fengshan left the most precious seat for? Xian Tao blurted out, but she had just spoken when Green Shadow interrupted her. How is that possible? Don't you see his appearance? Why does he have to sit above us? If he really is someone with background and strength, why did he let us scold him on the way here without even daring to talk back? As soon as Green Shadow finished speaking, Yao Fengshan had already taken the initiative to lead Li Changsheng over, and the position they were walking towards was one level higher than Yuan's group, the most distinguished guest position. When Li Changsheng sat down, Yuan's group widened their eyes. Your crow's beak was spot on. Xian Tao and Green Shadow had always been jealous of each other. Their tone carried some resentment. This is too much. Yuan's face had completely darkened. If the most honorable position had been reserved for a sect master from a northern reaches world of cultivation or an elder from some super sect, Yuan would have accepted it. But now, That position had been given to an ordinary young man, whom Ren Daoyuan looked down on. In Ren Daoyuan's view, Yao Fengchun was clearly humiliating him on purpose. Surnamed Yao, since you're so heartless, don't blame me for being unjust. Ren Daoyuan clenched his fists. Everyone knew that Immortal Crane Sect's first disciple Ren Daoyuan was lustful, but they did not know that he had another flaw. That was that he was petty and especially prideful. Yao Fengchun's arrangement had already made him very unhappy. Chapter 590. Who do you think you are? You dare to sit above my young master. A young maidservant behind Ren Daoyuan shouted at Li Chongqing's position. Sir Li is my Xianhuang Mountain's esteemed guest. His seat was arranged by Our Lady Yao. Du Wan, who was beside Li Chongqing, could not help but speak. She did not say this to protect Li Chongqing, but Li Chongqing's identity was too great. Xianhuang Mountain did not dare to slight him. If Sir Li was angered by a servant girl of Ren Daoyuan, no one would be able to bear the consequences of his anger on Xianhuang Mountain. But it would have been better if she did not say this, because once she did, Green Shadow's servant girl could not take it anymore. Impudent! You're just a servant. You have no right to speak. Saying so, she walked to Duwan's side and raised her hand to slap Duwan's face. Although this servant girl was called a servant girl, she was actually Ren Daoyuan's bed-warming servant girl. Because Ren Daoyuan doted on her in Immortal Crane Sect, she was used to being arrogant. After coming to Xianhuang Mountain and seeing that even Yao Fengchun was respectful to Ren Daoyuan, she immediately felt that she could do whatever she wanted in Xianhuang Mountain. Duwan did not expect the other party to be so arrogant in her own territory. She only reacted when the palm was about to land, but how could she dodge it? Duwan was only an ordinary servant girl in Xianhuang Mountain. Although she learned some body-nurturing techniques and was more agile than ordinary people, that was all there was to it. In contrast, although Ren Daoyuan's servant girl was rude and unreasonable, her skills were not bad. The palm was about to land on Duwan's face. This servant girl was also a ruthless person. Her attacks were ruthless. If this palm landed, Duwan would definitely lose a few teeth. Just as the palm was about to land, Duwan subconsciously closed her eyes. But in the end, the palm did not land. Instead, a hand grabbed the servant girl's wrist, causing her palm to stop 5 centimeters away from Duwan's face. The one who made the move was Li Chongqing. Although Duwan was only serving him temporarily, she spoke up for him. Li Chongqing naturally could not let her be slapped because of this. Seeing her wrist being grabbed, the maidservant was instantly enraged. She wanted to pull her wrist out, but she discovered that the other party's fingers were like iron pincers. How dare you? Let go of me. Do you want to die? I don't know if I want to die or not, but if you dare to speak rudely again, you will be the one to die. Li Chongqing abruptly loosened his grip on Ren Daoyuan's wrist and took 2 steps back. He turned around and made an expression that looked like he was about to cry as he looked at Ren Daoyuan. Young master, you have to help me. Ren Daoyuan glanced at Li Chongqing with a sinister gaze, then said to the maidservant, "Come back." Revenge is a dish best served cold. The maid glared fiercely at Li Chongqing before returning to her seat. Li Chongqing sat back down. "Thank you, sir," Duwan whispered. "I'm fine." Li Chongqing casually picked up a grape from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. "Sir, this Ren Daoyuan is famous for being vengeful. I'm afraid that after this banquet ends, he will harm you." Unknowingly, Duwan had already started to think for Li Chongqing. Who is he? He dares to be so arrogant in your Xianhuang Mountain? Li Chongqing asked casually. Originally, he was too lazy to bother with him, but the other party kept making things difficult for him. Li Chongqing was not a Buddha made of clay. He did not mind teaching him a lesson. He is the eldest disciple of Immortal Crane Sect. Originally, he came to borrow the Mountain Observing Tower Lord's Mountain Observing Mirror. But after he heard the news of the Tower Lord's death, he refused to leave. Immortal Crane Sect's eldest disciple. Li Chongqing spat out the grape skin in his mouth into the bin, a cold light flashing in his eyes. He still remembered that the reason why Luo Dan was imprisoned by Snow God Palace was because this eldest disciple of immortal crane sect saw Luo Dan and took a liking to her. He wanted Luo Dan to be his concubine, but Luo Dan refused and was imprisoned by Snow God Palace's palace lord. Enemies truly meet on a narrow road. Li Changshang shook his head, but his eyes turned cold. 10 minutes later, when everyone was seated, Yao Fengchun walked to the main seat and sat down. There were many disciples present who did not know about the death of eldest protector Hida and eldest senior brother Yang Shaoqing. So after Yao Fengchun sat down, many people were still looking around. Finally, when Yao Fengchun announced the start of the banquet, they suddenly realized that the eldest senior brother and eldest protector were in a bad situation. Their gazes towards Yao Fengchun became filled with respect. Today, I officially succeed as the Mountain Lord of Xianhuang Mountain. In the future, I will rely on everyone present to help me manage this family business. Yao Fengchun's words caused many people to stand up. Madam Yao, we are willing to do anything for you. These people were Yao Fengchun's trusted aides. A third of the people present did not move. Among these people, there were those who supported eldest protector and Yang Shaoqing, while there were also those who remained neutral. I wonder why eldest protector and senior brother Yang did not attend such an important banquet. A protector of the sect stood up and asked. He belonged to the neutral faction. Eldest protector Hida and Yang Shaoqing have malicious hearts. They intended to harm my Xianhuang Mountain, and I have already executed them on the spot. With Yao Fengchun's words, the crowd fell silent. Originally, Hida and Yang Shaoqing had been killed by Li Changsheng, but now, Yao Fengchun had taken responsibility for this matter in order to intimidate the crowd. After saying this, she cast an apologetic glance at Li Changsheng. Li Changsheng responded with a smile, indicating that he didn't mind. Upon hearing that even eldest protector and Yang Shaoqing had died at Yao Fengchun's hands, the neutral faction immediately knew what to choose. They were all fence-sitters. As for those who had originally favored Yang Shaoqing and Hida, they could only choose to support Yao Fengchun under these circumstances. Otherwise, once Yao Fengchun stabilized her position, they would not have a good time when she came to settle accounts. Madam Yao is wise. Eldest protector and Yang Shaoqing dared to plot against us. Even death cannot wipe out their crimes. A guardian of the neutral faction said loudly. Rebels and traitors. Everyone has the right to punish them. The others also agreed. A large portion of them were those who had originally supported Yang Shaoqing, and he is seeing this scene. Yao Fengchun inwardly let out a sigh of relief. At least the situation had been stabilized. From now on, Xianhuang Mountain will rely on everyone to work together with me and advance hand in hand. Saying this, Yao Fengchun raised her wine cup and was about to toast everyone. Suddenly, Ren Daoyuan stood up. Wait, regarding the change in Xianhuang Mountain and the death of the old mountain lord, my immortal crane sect is also extremely grieved. And just this afternoon, my master, who is often in closed-door cultivation, came out of seclusion. He heard about the matter of Xianhuang Mountain and was extremely pained. Thus, he personally came to mourn Mountain Viewing Tower Lord. Moreover, my master heard that Madame Yao had extraordinary talent in cultivation and wanted to take Madame Yao as his final disciple. What does Madame Yao think? Ren Daoyuan's words caused the entire place to fall silent. Xianhuang Mountain's family matters had nothing to do with Immortal Crane sect. Saying that he wanted to take Yao Fengchun as his final disciple, he clearly had an ulterior motive. Yao Fengchun already knew that with Mountain Viewing Tower Lord's death, many people would be eyeing Xianhuang Mountain, but she did not expect them to come so quickly. Even Immortal Crane sect's old sect master came out of seclusion for this. As for the so-called coincidence, how could there be such a coincidence in this world? Ren Daoyuan clearly knew about this and informed Immortal Crane sect, thus that sect master came out of seclusion. The so-called taking her in as his final disciple was just finding a legitimate reason to annex Xianhuang Mountain. At once, Yao Fengchun's expression turned bitter. The excitement from stabilizing the situation vanished without a trace. Chapter 591. Yao Fengchun and everyone else's expression became unsightly. Everyone knew of Sima Zhao's intentions. Mountain Viewing Tower Lord had just died. An immortal crane sect wanted to take advantage of the situation, hitting the weak spot of Xianhuang Mountain. Without Mountain Viewing Tower Lord, Xianhuang Mountain simply could not contend against a super sect like Immortal Crane Sect. Ren Daoyuan looked at Yao Fengchun with a cold smile, clearly having her in his grasp. Yao Fengchun subconsciously looked at Li Changsheng, who was sitting there. In an instant, Ren Daoyuan and the other concubines also looked in Li Changsheng's direction. Ren Daoyuan was very smart. He was thinking in his heart, could it be that this ordinary-looking brat has some special background? He doesn't seem to be very strong, but Yao Fengchun arranged for him to sit above me. At this time, Yao Fengchun subconsciously looked at him. What are you all looking at me for? I'm only here as a guest. Li Changsheng smiled, picking up the fruits on the table and slowly tasting them. Yao Fengchun's expression dimmed. If Li Changsheng really did not intend to interfere, then Xianhuang Mountain would be doomed today. But Ren Daoyuan's following words made Yao Fengchun overjoyed. This brat dares to sit above me. Green Shadow, go and teach him a lesson. That girl called Green Shadow had long found Li Changsheng an eyesore. Hearing Ren Daoyuan's words, her body immediately turned into an afterimage. That soft and boneless palm danced in the air, creating a green mist that surged towards Li Changsheng. She was actually a cultivation expert. Just a brat who doesn't know his place. Ren Daoyuan quickly locked his gaze on Yao Fengchun. Ever since Li Changsheng sat in a position one level higher than him, in his heart, Li Changsheng was already a dead man. Green Shadow's attack shocked many people, because from the strength of her attack, she was actually a Xiantian realm cultivator. The Xiantian realm was already considered a very high cultivation base in the north. Even the true disciples of the various sects were only at this level. I have no enmity with you. I just looked at you a few times on the road, but you came to find trouble with me again and again. Even if I'm a clay bodhisattva, I should be a little angry. Originally, I disdained to hit women, but when things came to it, I had to do it. Seeing Li Changsheng's mocking smile, Green Shadow suddenly had an ominous premonition. Li Changsheng slowly raised his hand as Green Shadow approached his body. His movement was very slow, but he appeared in front of Green Shadow in an instant. In an instant, Green Shadow felt all of his Zhan Yuan being imprisoned, as if all of his meridians were blocked by large and small stones, and the lingering green mist also disappeared in an instant. She couldn't help but feel shocked. In the next second, Li Changsheng's palm directly covered Green Shadow's cheek. His feet stepped on the ground, and the solid floor was covered with dense, spiderweb-like cracks. Bang, bang. 2 continuous steps on the ground. His body shot out like an arrow from a bow, pushing Green Shadow's head directly toward the opposite wall. When the people on the scene reacted from the sudden change, Green Shadow's whole body had been pushed by Li Changsheng, and her head was smashed into the wall behind her. That reinforced concrete wall had cracks on it. Releasing his palm, they saw a clear palm print on Green Shadow's face. Her body didn't fall, but half of her head was embedded in the wall. Green Shadow, I wanted to let your head and the wall burn together, but thinking about how much effort it took to build this wall, the wall is innocent. Li Changsheng looked at Green Shadow's body that was half embedded in the wall. He gently shook his head and sighed. It seemed that he was not satisfied with his work. Yao Fengchun stood on the side, and her whole person was stunned. She didn't doubt Li Changsheng's strength, but Li Changsheng's method of attack still made her heart pound. Ren Daoyuan was also stunned. His eyes stared at Li Changsheng, and his heart was somewhat hesitant. He was in a dilemma. What? Are you thinking about whether or not to make a move? Li Changsheng turned around and smiled at Ren Daoyuan. He still had that harmless appearance, but in Ren Daoyuan's eyes, the smile was somewhat sinister and terrifying. He finally knew why Yao Fengchun arranged Li Changsheng to be in a more honorable position than him. Just based on the battle strength that he just showed, it was something that he couldn't do. Your woman was beaten to a half-dead state by me. Are you not going to avenge her? Li Changsheng began to walk, step by step toward Ren Daoyuan. You better stop immediately. I, Rin Daoyuan, am not to be trifled with. It was unknown when a long sword appeared in Rin Daoyuan's hand. It flickered with cold light and locked onto Li Changxing's position. This is an attack-type artifact. As long as I use it, even a Vajra Rel martial expert will be injured. Is that so? Li Changxing chuckled with disdain in his eyes. He raised his hand, and a simple and unadorned small mirror appeared in his hand. Do you recognize this? The moment that small mirror appeared, the eyes of everyone in Mount Xianhuang became complicated. Rin Daoyuan revealed a puzzled expression. Why is the mountain observation mirror in your hands? Could it be that the mountain observation tower master died in your hands? Rin Daoyuan spoke the truth, but he immediately shook his head. Impossible. How old are you? How could you kill the mountain observation tower master? Whether it's possible or not, you can ask Madame Yao. Li Changxing smiled. Rin Daoyuan looked at Yao Fengshan. He saw Yao Fengshan lowering her head. In an instant, he understood something, and the hand holding the sword began to tremble. So it's you. In an instant, Rin Daoyuan's aura changed. As Li Changxing continued to approach, he also continued to retreat. Soon, he had retreated to the corner of the wall. Don't force me, Rin Daoyuan roared. However, Li Changxing had no intention of stopping. Explode. In an instant, he seemed to have made up his mind. The sword in his hand suddenly shook, and a terrifying aura spread from his body. Oh no! He's going to self-detonate his artifact. Many people in the hall cried out in alarm. The massive energy produced by the self-detonation of an artifact would probably implicate everyone in the hall. However, just as the sword was about to explode completely, Li Changxing suddenly reached out and pinched the tip of the sword with his fingers. Immediately, the artifact sword let out a mournful cry, and the terrifying aura in its body receded like a tide. How could this be? While Rin Daoyuan was still in shock, the sword in his hand had already left his hand and landed in Li Changxing's hand. Li Changxing's fingers turned slightly, grabbed the hilt, and slashed down at Rin Daoyuan's head. The sword cut through the air, and sword chi raged down. Chapter 592. Giving him a taste of his own medicine. Li Changxing's sword slashed down. Sword chi rampaged. The surrounding tables and utensils, including the decorative lamps above, were instantly smashed into smithereens by the sword chi. Facing this blazing sword chi, Rin Daoyuan's face was filled with fear. The grand head disciple of Immortal Crane sect, was he going to be slashed in half like this? Everyone stared at that blinding sword light, waiting for the moment when the final result would be revealed. But when the sword light truly slashed down, suddenly, space shook, and an old man in a white robe walked out from the space behind Rin Daoyuan, raising his sleeve to block that extremely bright sword. Immortal Crane sect's sect master. Many people cried out in shock. This old man in white was Rin Daoyuan's master, Immortal Crane sect's sect master, Wang Zheng. Who would have thought that Immortal Crane sect's sect master would appear so quickly and block Li Changxing's sword intent in an instant? Rin Daoyuan immediately let out a long sigh of relief. As if he had just walked through the gates of hell, his entire body was drenched in sweat. That old man appeared, his gaze landing on Li Changxing. Fellow Taoist, where it is possible to let people off, if my disciple has offended you in any way, please forgive him. Give me some face and let him off. How about it? Give you face? Who do you think you are? You're just a clone, a thing that hides its head and shows its tail. Li Changxing snorted coldly. Impudent, ignorant child. I am speaking nicely to you, but you do not know what is good for you. This old man has dominated the Northwest for decades. Even if it is just a clone, I can easily crush you to death. Why would I need my real body to come? Wang Zheng was enraged. Is that so? Li Changxing's eyes were filled with mockery. The sword in his hand suddenly emitted a bright light, pressing down inch by inch. Immortal Crane sect Master Wang Zheng's clone began to crack, and then completely disintegrated under the sword light. The sword light slashed through without any delay. At the same time, Wang Zheng's clone was destroyed, Ren Daoyuan's body was also cut into two. Keeping the sword, fresh blood dripped down the blade to the ground. Ren Daoyuan died. His body split from the middle, and then fell to the ground with a pong-pong sound. Silence reigned in the field. Immortal Crane Sect's first disciple Ren Daoyuan and Sect Master Wang Zheng's clones were all destroyed. After witnessing Li Changxing's strength, Ren Daoyuan's wife and the 6 maidservants were so scared that they were rooted to the spot, their faces filled with sorrow. Xian Tao looked at Li Changxing with hatred in her eyes. "You killed my husband. Sect leader Wang won't let you off." Xian Tao, who didn't go along with Green Shadow, was quite bold. Her eyes were filled with resentment. "People like you won't live long if you don't even know the word forbearance while walking the Jianghu." Li Changxing suddenly swung his hand, and a transparent palm print appeared in the wind. It slapped Xian Tao's face and sent her flying. When she landed on the ground, her face was already swollen and there was blood at the corner of her mouth. When Li Changxing looked at her again, she hurriedly lowered her head. Although his eyes were full of resentment, he did not dare to show it so obviously. "You've finally become smarter, but it's still far from enough." Li Changxing swung his hand again. The transparent palm appeared again and slapped her on the other side of her face. Xian Tao was sent flying again, crashing into the wall. This time, both her cheeks were swollen and her jade-like face could no longer be seen. Seeing Li Changxing teach Ren Daoyuan's concubine a lesson, Yao Fengchun and the maidservant Du Wan were delighted. Ren Daoyuan bullied others with his power, but none of his concubines were easy to deal with. They were all jackals of the same tribe. Seeing that Li Changxing was no longer attacking, Yao Fengchun hurriedly ordered her subordinates to clean up the broken wine cups and utensils. Even the dead Ren Daoyuan was dragged out. A new table was changed, and the floor was quickly wiped clean. Even the smell of blood was covered by perfume. "Sir Li, please continue to sit. I will ask the kitchen to serve the dishes immediately." After all, cultivators were not ordinary people. If an ordinary person had a dead person in front of them, how could they have the mood to eat, drink, and chat? But for cultivators, the death of a person was not a big deal. Li Changxing sat down again. Because Li Changxing did not say anything, no one dared to pull Ren Daoyuan's wife, Green Shadow, out of the wall. Half of her body was embedded in the wall like a statue. The woman who had been slapped twice lowered her head and squatted in a corner, sobbing nonstop. As Ren Daoyuan's wife, she was usually high and mighty. When had she ever been humiliated like this? But no matter how arrogant and despotic she was, she did not dare to go against Li Changxing at this moment. Since Li Changxing dared to kill Ren Daoyuan, he naturally dared to kill his wife. The only reason he did not kill her was because he was too lazy to do it. There was another unharmed woman and 6 maidservants. At this moment, they were all trembling in fear, standing in a row by the wall, like criminals waiting to be dealt with. However, Li Changxing did not spare them a glance from beginning to end. When the main course was served, Yao Fengchun took the initiative to propose a toast to Li Changxing. When the people of Mount Xianwang saw that Yao Fengchun had a backer like Li Changxing, some of their restless thoughts were quietly dispelled. After taking in everyone's expressions, Yao Fengchun became even more grateful to Li Changxing. This time, she was a bit insatiable in her attempt to intimidate Li Changxing. Thus, she took the initiative to sit next to Li Changxing and accompany Li Changxing for a drink. Her soft body leaned on Li Changxing's body, hinting to Li Changxing that as long as he gave her a look, she would recommend herself to be his pillow. This scene fell into the eyes of many people. Although they secretly cursed this coquettish fox, they were also envious and jealous. Halfway through the banquet, Li Changxing suddenly slammed the table. With a loud bang, Yao Fengchun, who was in a daze, suddenly sat up in shock. Everyone stopped talking and looked at Li Changxing in confusion. They thought, could it be that this Sir Li is dissatisfied with something? Right now, he's like the ancestor of Mount Xianwang. But immediately, they saw a small black worm being shaken out of the table. It was just about to flap its wings and escape when Li Changsheng pointed at it with a finger, shattering it into pieces. That immortal crane sect master was indignant that his disciple died in my hands. So he used the connection between himself and his clone to hide this small goo worm under the table, waiting for an opportunity to use the wine to enter my body. Hearing Li Changsheng's words, everyone came to a realization and heaved a sigh of relief. So it was not because of a lack of hospitality. This immortal crane sect master, I originally wanted to let him live a little longer, but it seems that he is impatient to die. Li Changsheng suddenly stood up. Since he wants to die, how can I not fulfill his wish? As soon as he finished speaking, Li Changsheng grabbed the flying sword that he had taken from Ren Daoyuan and threw it in the direction of the door. Instantly, the flying sword turned into a rainbow and flew out of the hall, heading towards Immortal Crane Sect. Chapter 593. Does this Mr. Li intend to kill Immortal Crane Sect Master with just one throw? Everyone in the hall was confused. Taking the enemy's head from 1,000 miles away was a thing of legends. Perhaps only the legendary Earth Immortal Great Tao could do it. Li Changsheng clearly could not be a true Earth Immortal. True Earth Immortals only existed in legends. They had never been heard of in reality. In fact, Li Changsheng indeed could not reach the Earth Immortal Great Tao. The so-called Earth Immortal had the word immortal. It was already extraordinary. In the course of 99 lifetimes, Li Changsheng, who had lived for countless years, had never been able to take that step. Everyone, sit down and continue drinking. Li Changsheng returned to his seat and poured himself a cup of wine. Hearing Li Changsheng's words, everyone naturally did not dare to disobey. They only sat there absent-mindedly, their gazes constantly drifting outside. It was not that they did not believe in Li Changsheng's strength, but a casual throw of the sword to take the enemy's head from 1,000 miles away was too inconceivable. This kind of godly sword technique was simply unimaginable. And Li Changsheng turned a blind eye to everyone's doubtful gazes, only drinking cup after cup of wine. Occasionally, he would tease Yao Fengshan beside him. Regardless of whether it was funny or not, Yao Fengshan would laugh hysterically, her breasts surging. Everyone could only laugh along, but what they didn't know was that Li Changsheng was in Cao Cao's camp, but his heart was elsewhere. He seemed to be sitting there drinking wine, but most of his mind was attached to the magic tool flying sword. The sword Qi flew out of Mount Xianhuang and cut through the clouds, instantly traversing dozens of miles. The sword Qi rumbled like a fighter jet. The primordial Qi, it brought about surging waves in the sky, drawing out a long trajectory. The northern lands were originally a paradise for cultivators. There were dozens of sects of various sizes. The commotion caused by the sword Qi grew bigger and bigger. All the sects of various sizes noticed this scene. They stood on top of the mountain and looked at the flying sword that flew over their heads. Their minds wavered as they guessed which sect had provoked such a terrifying sword immortal. Just based on the might of the flying sword, it was most likely inferior to a strike from a finger-profound realm expert. Many people were looking around to see if the owner of the flying sword was following closely behind. This was because the most powerful swordsman in the world could control a flying sword to travel more than 1,000 meters. That was already enough to be called a swordsman. However, many people stared anxiously. In the end, their eyes were incomparably dry. They still could not find the person controlling the flying sword. Instead, the flying sword flew further and further away. Could it be that the master of the flying sword knows the invisibility technique? He can't be flying on a flying sword from 100 li away, right? Many people felt that this idea was absurd. But if they were to know that the master of the flying sword was currently drinking wine on Mount Xianhuang, who knew what they would think? At this moment, inside Immortal Crane Sect Master Wang Zheng was enraged. "You're going too far. You don't put me in your eyes at all." Wang Zheng, who was dressed in a white robe, originally had the demeanor of a transcendent being, but at this moment he was stamping with rage. Their disciples were killed, their clones were destroyed, but the other party did not mind going all out against Immortal Crane's sect. My eldest senior brother of Immortal Crane's sect was killed. Should we go to Mount Xianhuang to take revenge for him? Immortal Crane's sect's second disciple revealed a look of grief and indignation, but in the depths of his eyes, there was a trace of undetectable excitement. As the second disciple of Immortal Crane's sect's sect master, he had extraordinary talent and was very capable. He had high prestige in Immortal Crane's sect, but he was still lacking compared to Ren Daoyuan. As long as Ren Daoyuan was alive, he would at most be an elder. Immortal Crane's sect would always be under Ren Daoyuan's control. Now that Ren Daoyuan was dead, the position of sect master was in his bag. There was no need to mention how excited he was in his heart. He wanted nothing more than to kowtow 3 times to Li Changsheng, who had killed Ren Daoyuan, to thank him for clearing the obstacles for his promotion to the position of sect master. Wang Zheng looked at the submissive second disciple in front of him and could not help but snort. How could he not know about the filthy matters between disciples? That eldest disciple was arrogant and despotic and was not popular in the sect. When choosing a successor, character and intelligence were not as important as cultivation aptitude. Now that Ren Daoyuan was killed, if Immortal Crane's sect were to fall into the hands of this second disciple, it would definitely be worse than Ren Daoyuan. Without a good successor, Wang Zheng really wanted to kill his way to Mount Xianhuang and tear the bastard who dared to kill his disciple into pieces. But at that time, even though it was Wang Zheng's clone that faced Li Changsheng, it was no different from his main body being there. The power of that sword still made Wang Zheng's heart palpitate. He wanted to take revenge for his disciple's death, but he was not willing to take the risk. We still need to formulate a detailed plan to take revenge for your eldest senior brother. Wang Zheng spoke, just as he was about to send a few disciples to find out who that unprepossessing youth in Mount Xianhuang was. He suddenly raised his head and looked towards the horizon. The disciples did not understand what was wrong with their master, but soon they discovered that a white light was rapidly flying over from the horizon. A powerful rumbling sound, along with surging heaven and earth primordial energy, caused everyone's heart to palpitate even though it was over 1,000 meters away. At the same time, they shockingly discovered that the mountain protecting formation protecting Immortal Crane's sect showed signs of collapsing before the sword even got close. Isn't that eldest senior brother's a flying sword? Many people's swords began to tremble. I haven't even taken revenge for my disciple, and he dares to kill his way to our sect. Wang Zheng's eyes were filled with dense killing intent, but there was also shock. Just from a might of the treasure sword, he began to feel apprehensive. Since he dares to use a sword to provoke us, why not show his true body? Wang Zheng roared. In his opinion, Li Changsheng was definitely nearby, just that he did not dare to show himself. Wang Zheng's voice reverberated in the mountains, but Li Changsheng did not appear, and that treasure sword was already near Immortal Crane's sect's mountain. Could this be the scoundrel who killed eldest senior brother? He is too arrogant, coming to our Immortal Crane's sect's territory to behave so atrociously. Wang Zheng's second disciple snorted coldly, taking a large step forward and pulling out his treasure sword, primeval essence surging all over his body. He knew that it was time for him to perform, as long as he displayed enough courage in this battle. Even if he was heavily injured by that sword-controlling expert, he would not be able to run away from the position of Immortal Crane's sect's heir. Moreover, Immortal Crane's sect's territory had a mountain protecting formation passed down by their ancestors. It was uncertain if the other party could break the formation. And so what if they could break the mountain protecting formation? The reason why Immortal Crane's sect had such a name was because there was an immortal crane that had lived for hundreds of years protecting the sect. That immortal crane was of the same generation as Immortal Crane's sect's ancestor. That immortal crane cultivated continuously, and had already become one with the mountains and earth veins around Immortal Crane's sect. It was not weaker than a finger-profound realm expert, and within 100 li radius of Immortal Crane's sect, its battle strength would double. It was the true trump card of Immortal Crane sect. Chapter 594. As the flying sword got closer, Immortal Crane sect Master Wang Zheng snorted coldly, indicating to his disciples not to act rashly. Then, pillars of light rose up from the mountain peak, where Immortal Crane sect was, forming a dazzling formation in the sky. At the same time, an immortal crane flew out from the central hall of Immortal Crane sect, spreading its wings like the clouds in the sky. It was like a small mountain, letting out a clear cry, the sound waves vibrating with unparalleled destructive power. But at the next moment, the sword Qi collided with the mountain protecting formation. That seemingly sturdy mountain protecting formation crumbled almost instantly, causing the entire mountain peak, where Immortal Crane sect was located, to shake intensely. Such sharp sword Qi. Immortal Crane sect's disciples were all shocked. In the hearts of every Immortal Crane sect disciple, the mountain protecting formation was an incomparably sturdy existence. But today, it was broken so easily. Don't panic. With Lord Immortal Crane here, no one can shake Immortal Crane sect, Wang Zheng said resolutely. Immortal Crane sect's old crane had lived for 800 years. It was a young bird that Immortal Crane sect's first ancestor tamed in an ancient ruin. Back then, when he followed the first ancestor of Immortal Crane sect, his cultivation level was only equivalent to a human's Qi refinement level. He only lived for 800 years, and under the torment of time, his strength was forcefully raised to the level of a finger-profound realm expert. The reason why Snow God Palace's Palace Lord Yu Shi gave Luo Dan, who had contributed greatly to Snow God Palace, to Rin Daoyuan as a concubine, was because Immortal Crane sect had this old crane. It was much stronger than Snow God Palace. In terms of cultivation level, before Mountain Viewing Tower's master broke through to finger-profound realm, the strongest person in the entire northern lands should be this old crane. Unfortunately, it was not human, otherwise the title of number 1 expert in the northern lands would be given to it. No wonder Wang Zheng was so confident. With a clear cry, that immortal crane's steel-like claws grabbed at the flying sword, its eyes revealing a human-like look of disdain. This old crane had cultivated here for 800 years. It had already fused the mountain and earth veins with its own great Tao. Its battle strength was close to the peak of finger-profound realm. Crack! It was just an afterimage that flashed by. No one could see clearly whether the pair of claws had grabbed the flying sword or not before they lost sight of the flying sword. In the next second, the old crane suddenly let out a long, mournful cry. Then its steel-like claws instantly exploded into 2 balls of dust. Immediately after, a sword light pierced through the old crane's back. Blood splattered, and a few feathers that were tougher than steel fell from the sky. Lord Immortal, Crane has lost. Wang Zheng's mouth was slightly agape, his eyes filled with disbelief. After the flying sword pierced through the old crane's body, it made a turn in the sky and stabbed down again. This time, he aimed at the old crane's head. Save Lord Crane! Wang Zheng cried out in shock and brought out his sword, wanting to help old Crane block the sword light. However, his sword had only flown halfway when the flying sword flashed past the red-crowned crane's neck, and a huge crane head fell from the sky. When the flying sword returned to the sky again, blood spurted out. The old crane that Immortal Crane sect had raised for 800 years was killed in one slash, just like that. Immortal Crane sect Master Wang Zheng was dumbstruck. This red-crowned crane seniority was as high as Immortal Crane sect's first-generation ancestor. It had always been the guardian of Immortal Crane sect, protecting generation after generation. To think that it would be killed today. However, he did not have much time to grieve. The flying sword in the sky flew over again. This time, it aimed at Immortal Crane sect Master Wang Zheng. Wang Zheng reacted and looked at the descending flying sword. He was so frightened that his soul almost left his body. Although he was strong, he was only at Vajra realm. Even the red-crowned crane that was equivalent to peak finger profound realm was killed in one slash. Not to mention him. Without hesitation, he turned his sword into a sword light and tried to block the flying sword. Then, he turned around and fled into the distance. The sword light turned into a sword light that was like a sturdy shield. However, when the flying sword flashed past, it broke the sword light and turned Wang Zheng's sword into a pile of metal shavings. At this moment, Wang Zheng had already fled into the Great Hall behind him. Formations rose in the Great Hall. Many Immortal Crane sect disciples were already pale with fright. After Wang Zheng fled into the Great Hall and activated the formations, they were also isolated outside. Although there were hundreds of Immortal Crane sect disciples outside, facing this unstoppable flying sword, they did not even have the courage to block it. Like a flock of sheep facing a ferocious tiger, they had no strength to resist. Fortunately, that flying sword ignored the existence of these disciples. After destroying the sword light, it brought along a long air wave and slashed towards the Great Hall. Rumble! The earth quaked and the mountains shook. Layer after layer of formations rose up in the hall, but under the sword light, they were easily broken apart. Like a knife cutting through tofu, the entire hall was split into two, revealing Wang Zheng who was hiding inside. At this moment, Wang Zheng's eyes were filled with despair. That descending flying sword pierced through his chest and nailed him to the ground. He spat out blood. His gaze was unfocused, but he still looked around. From start to finish, the owner of the flying sword did not appear. My Immortal Crane sect is no longer a threat to you. Why don't you offer yourself to me? Wang Zheng coughed up blood with every word he spoke, but in the end, Li Changsheng still did not appear. Don't tell me he really came from profound Yellow Mountain with a flying sword and took my life? As his life faded away, Wang Zheng had a thought that he could not believe even in death. Finally, his head drooped down and he stopped breathing. A few minutes later, that small flying sword that pierced through Wang Zheng's chest had many cracks on it. The spirit energy on it had dissipated. It was no different from a piece of scrap metal. Because this flying sword broke through Immortal Crane sect's mountain protecting formation, clashed with that old crane, and finally broke Wang Zheng's treasure sword, it could not bear the burden anymore. Finally, after breaking through the Great Hall's formation and killing Wang Zheng, it became completely useless, completing its mission. Immortal Crane sect's disciples stared blankly at the ruins of the Great Hall, as well as the sect master who was pierced through by the sword, their faces filled with sorrow. Everyone's gazes turned towards that second senior brother. Without a doubt, now that the Immortal Crane and the old sect master were dead, the second senior brother who had the highest strength and status would undoubtedly become the new sect master of Immortal Crane sect. But second senior brother did not feel any joy. Without the old sect master and that old crane, even if he inherited the position of sect master, Immortal Crane sect would fall to a second-rate sect. Especially this enemy who used a flying sword to kill enemies from 1,000 miles away, who knew if he would come and find trouble with Immortal Crane sect again. At that time, the first to die would be him, the sect master. Second senior brother, what do we do now? A junior brother went up and bowed. Our Immortal Crane sect provoked an existence that we should not have provoked. We are seeking our own destruction. Immediately announced to the outside world that our Immortal Crane sect will seal our sect for 10 years. We only hope that Sword Immortal will let us go. Otherwise, the heavens want our Immortal Crane sect to perish. We can only stretch out our necks and wait to be cut. That second senior brother sighed. Li Changxing's sword not only killed the old sect master and an Immortal Crane, it also shattered Immortal Crane sect's morale. In the future, Immortal Crane sect would implant a seed of fear in every disciple's heart. If they wanted to regain their prestige, who knew how many generations it would take before they could do so? Chapter 595. Xianhuang Mountain's banquet continued. No one knew what was happening in Immortal Crane sect that was thousands of miles away. Yao Fengchun sat beside Li Changsheng the entire time, pouring wine and taking food as if she was Li Changsheng's maid. Actually, you don't have to serve me like this. As long as you help me protect the thing nurtured in Xianhuang Mountain's spirit vein, no one can shake your position as the mountain lord of Xianhuang Mountain. Hearing Li Changsheng's words, Yao Fengchun nodded heavily. The banquet quickly came to an end. Yao Fengchun finally left Li Changsheng's side and returned to the host's seat. Originally, many people were looking outside, but seeing that the banquet was about to end and that flying sword had yet to return, they all shook their heads, thinking, I actually believed Li Changsheng's words. Riding a sword for thousands of miles and taking the enemy's head, how could that happen in reality? After the banquet ended, Li Changsheng returned to his small courtyard to rest. Yao Fengchun waited until everyone had left before she stretched her waist, revealing her exquisite curves. A few disciples standing guard at the entrance could not help but sneak a few glances. The disciples' strange expressions naturally could not escape Yao Fengchun's eyes. She looked at her almost perfect figure and could not help but sigh. Even Mountain Viewing Tower's lord was charmed to death by her, but that Mr. Li did not even look at her when she threw herself at him. Was there really a cat in this world that did not eat fish? Although Li Changsheng promised to protect Xianhuang Mountain as long as she helped protect the thing nurtured in the spirit vein, how could this promise be more reliable than turning Li Changsheng into one of her own? In the past, she could rely on Mountain Viewing Tower's lord for everything, but now that she suddenly lost her backing, even though she obtained the position of Xianhuang Mountain's mountain lord that she yearned for, her heart felt empty. Madam, that time at the banquet, Mr. Li stabbed with his sword, saying that he wanted to take the head of Immortal Crane sect Master Wang Zheng. At first, I thought it was true, but where did that sword go? It did not return in the end. Duan said casually as she poured tea for Yao Fengchun. Originally, she was supposed to take care of Li Changsheng's food and lodging, but Li Changsheng wanted to cultivate and told her to go tomorrow morning, so she returned to Yao Fengchun's side, taking the enemy's head from 1,000 miles away. That's a legendary sword immortal technique. Mr. Li is just joking with everyone. Yao Fengchun smiled. She didn't have much hope in the beginning, so naturally, she wasn't disappointed. So that's the case. That Mr. Li looks quite honest. I didn't expect him to be able to joke around. Not only me, but many people were deceived by him at the banquet today. All right, you can leave after you've brewed the tea. I want to be alone for a while. Yes. Duan nodded. Yao Fengchun walked into the inner room. A few minutes later, she came out in a tight-fitting outfit that accentuated her curves. At this moment, in the small courtyard, Li Changsheng was cultivating. The matter of Mount Xianhuang was cleared. An Immortal Crane sect was dealt with. He was preparing to return tomorrow. There was still the mess of Kunlun sect in Qin City to clean up. But suddenly, he opened his eyes. There was a knock on the door. Please come in. As he said that, a beautiful figure walked in. It was Yao Fengchun who had changed into a new outfit. Her long black hair rested on her shoulders. She had a V-shaped neckline and slender thighs under her short skirt. After she walked in, she looked at Li Changsheng with a smile. Mr. Li, the night is long. Why don't I chat with you to relieve your boredom? One had to admit that Yao Fengchun's current outfit was indeed very bewitching, especially when it was close to dusk. The beauty under the light added some color. But thinking that she was the concubine of Mountain Viewing Tower Lord, Li Changsheng hurriedly shook his head. No need. I still have to cultivate at night. Lady Yao, please leave. Yao Fengchun looked at Li Changsheng with hidden bitterness. In the end, seeing that Li Changsheng was not putting on an act, she could only leave Li Changsheng's courtyard unwillingly. After Yao Fengchun left completely, Li Changsheng let out a sigh of relief. It was said that heroes could not resist the charms of beauties. Just now, he almost could not resist nodding and agreeing. After Yao Fengchun left, Li Changsheng took a long time to calm down and start cultivating. The next morning, Duan brought breakfast. After eating, Li Changsheng told Duan to tell Yao Fengchun that he was leaving. Soon, Yao Fengchun and a group of Mount Xianhuang disciples came to send Li Changsheng off. Because of last night's matter, Yao Fengchuan's expression was somewhat unnatural when she saw Li Changsheng. After sending Li Changsheng off the mountain and disappearing from sight, Yao Fengchun and the group of protector elders and disciples returned to Mount Xianwang. This Mr. Li's strength is so unfathomable at such a young age. It's just that he is a bit timid. When he said that he was going to return to Fengyao City, it meant that he did not plan to find trouble with Immortal Crane sect. If only he taught those Immortal Cranes a lesson. A protector side. Even Immortal Crane sect leader Wang Zheng is not Mr. Li's match. But Immortal Crane sect has an old crane protecting them. Even with Mr. Li's strength, he has to be wary of that old crane's strength. Yao Fengchun also felt some regret. Just as they returned halfway up the mountain, a disciple ran down the mountain while panting. Lady Yao, protectors, the people we planted in Immortal Crane sect just sent news. Immortal Crane sect leader Wang Zheng was killed by a flying sword from outer space yesterday. Other than that, the old crane protecting Immortal Crane sect was also killed. Immortal Crane sect has already announced to the outside world that they will seal their sect for 10 years. Hearing that disciples' words, Yao Fengchun and the protector elders of Immortal Crane sect were all stunned. A flying sword that fell from the sky? Could it be the one Mr. Li threw out yesterday? Immortal Crane sect is 1,000 li away from Immortal Crane sect. Li Changxing actually threw a flying sword over and took the life of Immortal Crane sect leader. This is too terrifying. Yao Fengchuan's eyes shone brightly. She could not suppress the excitement in her heart. The stronger Li Changsheng was, the more stable her position as the mountain lord of Immortal Crane sect would be. Meanwhile, the other protector disciples fell into silence. Yesterday, when Li Changsheng took out his flying sword and said some brave words, they all saw it and remembered it in their hearts. However, after the banquet ended, they still did not see the flying sword return, so they all treated it as a joke. Who would have thought that it would actually come true? Immediately spread the news that Mr. Li is the backer of Immortal Crane sect. Yao Fengchun immediately ordered her subordinates. With Mr. Li's 1,000 li sword riding move, even if our Immortal Crane sect no longer has Mountain Gazing Tower Lord, no one will dare to spy on us. Just as Yao Fengchun was excited about her stable position, Li Changsheng had already returned to Fengyao City, arriving at Lu tribe's residence. Chapter 596. For the entire Fengyao City, the Lu family was a colossus. Originally, because Lu Bai was an elder of the Snow God's palace, even the disciples of the several super sects in the northern region had to be respectful when they saw the Lu family. This also established the Lu family's position as the overlord of Fengyao City. The Lu family's mansion covered an area of more than 10 acres, and there were 2 huge stone lions in front of the door, which looked very imposing. Li Changxing appeared in front of the Li family's mansion, and another figure appeared almost at the same time as him. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s, wearing a suit and leather shoes. He was handsome, but he was holding a Miao Dao in his hand, which did not match his outfit. Li Changsheng was just about to step in when a young man reached out and blocked his way. "Young man, listen to my advice. The Lu family is not receiving guests today. If you have something to do, come another day." After saying that, he proudly walked inside the door. "Aren't you a guest too? Why can you go in, but I can't?" Li Changsheng also took a step forward. The other party once again reached out and blocked his way. "Young man, I'm doing this for your own good. Why won't you listen? The Lu family has encountered some trouble today. If you barge in, you may be implicated. But I'm not afraid of trouble." Li Changsheng grinned and was about to continue walking. The other party did not expect Li Changsheng to be so stubborn, so he had to get to the point. "Since you know the Lu family, you should know that the Lu family is a family of cultivators. Then I won't hide it from you. The trouble the Lu family has encountered this time is caused by a cultivator who came looking for trouble. The Lu family's eldest daughter, Lu Jiala, whose cultivation aptitude was very ordinary, suddenly improved by leaps and bounds some time ago. As a result, she happened to be taken in by a cultivator who wandered here and insisted on taking the Liu family's young lady as his disciple. Of course, the Liu family would not let a stranger take away their junior. That Taoist was very overbearing. In a fit of anger, he beat up all the experts of the Liu family and gave them a day to consider. Well, that evil Tao came again today. None of the Liu family's experts could deal with him. I'm here to help the Liu family. If you know what's good for you, leave quickly. If there's a conflict, that evil Tao can take your life with a slap. After the man finished speaking, he pointed to the door, signaling Li Changsheng to leave. Li Changsheng immediately understood what was going on. LV Jala originally had the Fire Phoenix bloodline, but she cultivated the Ice Attribute cultivation method. Naturally, she would be able to achieve half the results with twice the effort. The last time he taught her the Fire Phoenix bloodline, he guessed that she had already activated the Fire Phoenix bloodline, which allowed her martial arts cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. Looks like LV Jala's luck is quite good. After activating his Fire Wind bloodline, his future will be bright. Li Changsheng thought to himself, since that Taoist is so strong, why didn't the Liu family let LV Jala be his disciple? Hearing Li Changsheng's question, although the man was a little anxious about the situation in the mansion, he still patiently explained, I heard that the Liu family's young miss was able to have such an opportunity because an expert gave her a set of cultivation method. That expert is very powerful and intends to take LV Jala as his disciple. If evil Tao takes LV Jala away, that expert will come back and punish the Liu family. Then how do you know such a confidential matter? Li Changsheng was a little curious about this strange man in front of him. The man hesitated for a moment and whispered, Me? I'm LV Jala's uncle. This caused Li Changsheng's face to turn blank. As far as he knew, LV Jala only had one aunt, LV Shan, and LV Shan didn't seem to be married. As if seeing Li Changsheng's thoughts, the man smiled awkwardly. To tell you the truth, I've always liked LV Shan, but LV Shan doesn't like me. So I want to use the Liu family's crisis to perform well and strive to win the beauty's heart. I have a reason to go in. Little brother, I advise you not to go in and join the fun. No. What if I say I have a reason to go in? Li Changsheng smiled. The man suddenly realized. Do you like LV Jala? Li Changsheng hurriedly waved his hand. No, if I say I'm the expert who gave LV Jala a cultivation method, do you think this reason is sufficient? Huh. The man couldn't help but laugh. You? An expert? Little brother, find a mirror and look at yourself. Which part of you looks like an expert? Just as he was mocking Li Changsheng, a crackling sound suddenly came from the Liu family's mansion. Not good. That evil Tao is fighting with the Liu family. I have to go in and help. The man pulled out the long saber in his hand and ran inside. Li Changsheng followed closely behind. This time, the other party was clearly not in the mood to care about Li Changsheng's life and death. With a few leaps, he disappeared from Li Changsheng's sight. Inside the Liu family's mansion, an old man in a Taoist robe, with a wine gourd hanging on his waist and a red short sword in his hand. The hilt of the short sword was engraved with an yin and yang pattern. The blade was not sharp and looked a little blunt, but there was a red light constantly flowing on it, like a furnace, roasting the surrounding air until it was extremely hot. Opposite him was a group of old and young people from the Liu family. LV Jala's grandfather, LV Tian, LV Jala's father, LV Lei, Uncle LV Bai, and Aunt LV Shan. LV Bai, LV Lei, and LV Tian looked at the three of them with wounds of different sizes. It was obvious that in the fight just now, the three of them had lost to this old Taoist. I, venerable fiery dragon, have dominated the world for dozens of years. My fire cultivation technique is at the peak of perfection and can be said to be the best in the world. To be able to take a liking to your Liu family's daughter is her fortune. You guys that don't know what's good for you dare to stop me. Let me ask you one more time. Let me take this girl away as my disciple. Do you agree? If you don't agree, then I'll flatten your Liu family and kill this girl. With such a good cultivation talent, If she can't be my disciple, then I can't leave behind any future troubles. Hearing the old Taoist words, the faces of the Liu family members were bitter. LV Bai said, "Venerable fiery dragon, I've heard of your name. But the reason why my niece has her current cultivation is all because of the guidance of an expert. He wants to take Jala as his disciple. If you take Jala away, that expert will blame us. My Liu family cannot bear the consequences. Moreover, that expert is very powerful. If he knows that you snatched his disciple away, I'm afraid you won't have a good ending. I hope you can reconsider." LV Bai had already seen the strength of this venerable fiery dragon. But thinking of Li Chongqing's methods, this venerable fiery dragon was nothing. Especially when he heard that Li Chongqing used a sword to fly 1,000 miles and kill Immortal Crane Sect's Old Crane and Sect Master Wang Zheng. His heart was filled with reverence. In Snow God Temple, Li Chongqing did not bicker with him and spared his life. He did not dare to go against Li Chongqing again. Bullshit. Are you still going to talk about him riding a sword for 1,000 miles to take someone's head? Huh. Do you really think that I, venerable fiery dragon, am a 3-year-old kid? Since the expert you were talking about is so capable, why don't you ask him to come? I have already given you a day's time, but where is his shadow? I'm afraid that after hearing my name, venerable fiery dragon, he would have already peed his pants? Hearing venerable fiery dragon's words, LV Bai felt helpless. Previously, he heard that Li Chongqing was at Mount Xianhuang. Yesterday afternoon, he sent someone to Mount Xianhuang to report the news. But the distance from Fengyao City to Mount Xianhuang was about 800 miles. It was not a smooth road either. Passing through the forest, it would take about 10 hours. And in the morning, he found out that the person who reported the news had gone to Mount Xianhuang. But Li Chongqing was no longer there. It would not be easy to find Li Chongqing again. It would be great if Mr. Li could come to my Liu family at this time. Just as LV Bai was thinking about this, a figure suddenly barged in from outside. "Whoever dares to hurt the Liu family will have to go through me first." Hearing the voice, the Liu family members raised their heads in surprise. But when they saw that the person who barged in was a man in a suit, the hope that had just been ignited in their hearts dimmed instantly. Why is it this guy? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.